Work session for today, Tuesday, September 3rd to session. Before we get started, we have an exciting event to happen first. I would like to call Ms. Susan Hicks up and Mr. John Weaver up. And Ms. Hicks will administer the oath of office. Yeah, I'm going to, so the family,
Invite the family up, right?
if you can come on up and,
The whole family.
this is a family affair. Anybody else?
Yeah.
John, I thought your family was larger than that.
You can all come on up, it's okay.
Do you, John Weaver, solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States, so help you God? Do you, John Weaver, solemnly and sincerely swear to be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of North Carolina and to the constitutional powers and authorities which are or may be established for the government thereof, and that you will endeavor to support, maintain, and defend the Constitution of said state, not inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States, to the best of your knowledge and ability, so help you God?
I do.
Do you, John Weaver, swear that you will well and truly execute the duties of the office of a member of the Moore County Board of Education according to the best of your skill and ability and according to law, so help you God? Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
John, why don't you walk around so we can congratulate you? Either way.
Do we want to do one photo with the family? We'll do one photo with the family. Would you like to do that? Let's do that.
Board members?
Oh, group photo?
Yeah, you
Let's
guys
do
too.
one with the family and then we'll do a group.
Okay, good.
Like a wedding. Photos. Oh.
Okay.
No problem.
Back up as much as you can because of the table here, so, I don't know, I'm not the photographer.
I'll let you get yours and I'll then. Good?
Go ahead.
Okay. And then we'll do a group shot of the board.
Yeah, we'll do one with the board, the full board now. Thank you so much for coming. We'll do one with the board. You tell us how to stand. Catherine, any? Look pretty seasoned at this, so can help out the new guy.
Probably shouldn't call women seasoned.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, here, 1, 2, 3.
Welcome aboard, Mr. Weaver. We're glad to have you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There is a motion to approve the agenda by Mr. Dennison, a second by Ms. Thompson. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask Ms. Carter to lead
Please
us.
stand and join me in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and
Justice for all.
Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. We have a rather long agenda ahead of us today, board members and those watching in the audience. We will attempt to take breaks as needed to just stretch, so just be aware of that I'll be monitoring the time. If we need to take one earlier than you think I'm ready for, then just give me a signal. Dr. Grimacy.
Yes, ma'am. At
Thank you
this
very
time,
much.
I'll invite Mr. Barath and Dr. Locklear and Mr. Miller and Ms. Evans to join me at the presentation table.
Do you have enough room? Yeah, I feel like I take all of it.
Do you have a sense of my presentation? Madam Chair, members of the board, it is with a humble sense of duty and responsibility that I join with my colleagues to present to you a proposed final plan for the realignment of school boundaries intended to be implemented over the 2020, 21 and 2021-22 school years. This proposed plan is intended to satisfy the directives you sent forth during your meetings on January 14th and February 4th of this year. During your meeting on January 4th, you voted to proceed with student assignment planning, and you designated Numerics as consultants for that process. On February 4th, you approved the process and timeline for student assignment planning. Today, September 3rd, was designated as the date by which you expected me to present the final proposed plan. The process you approved reaffirmed the guiding principles you had applied in the previous student assignment process that was employed in the fall of 2018 in anticipation of the opening of the new McDeeds Creek Elementary School. The process also identified desired outcomes for the 2019 student reassignment process that would address school boundary challenges across all of Moore County. Yeah, it's good, thank you. Participating in this presentation with me today are members of our senior staff, Dr. Tim Locklear and Mr. John Barath, and our numerics consultants, Mr. Mike Miller and Ms. Laura Evans. Together with Dr. Mike Metcalf, another member of our senior staff, we formed the Executive Planning Committee for the process. As you can see from the slide, the presentation will provide an overview of the needs that require realignment of school boundaries, the process for community engagement that has been employed, the process framework that has guided the work, the actual proposed plan and its related elements, the committee's final reflections, and an explanation of the variety of data sets that informed the work and are included in the appendix. And now it is my pleasure to yield to Ms. Evans to begin our presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Good afternoon. Good to be here with you again today. Mike and I have been with you for 2 years now, or roughly 2 years. And one of the very first things we did with you is to work with you as you developed the guiding principles for the student assignment plan. And these guiding principles have really become our owner's manuals, so to speak. Everything we've done as we worked through the first year toward McDeeds Creek and through the second year as we worked on the changes for the new seats that became available at the elementary school, and in a minute I'll talk about our desired outcomes. Everything we've done over the past 2 years, we've really relied on these guiding principles. Y'all did an excellent job laying forth how you wanted us to proceed. And so the guiding principles, there's 4 of them: balance, planning, efficiency, and community. Again, I can't tell you how many times we've turned back to this page and said, how does this align with the guiding principles? In balance, we looked at utilization across the district. And I feel like in the end, that's where we did our best work, and you'll see that here in a minute. But we also looked at program opportunities and student demographics. They were not drivers, but they were points along the way that we did pay attention to. Under planning, we worked very hard to make sure we had the most up-to-date information. We knew that Moore County is not one to change school district lines very often. You're a very stable school district in that sense. And our goal was that the next time you have to go down this road, it will be a number of years from now. And many of us in the room today probably won't be in the room. But we wanted it to be a solid plan that could take you through several years. Under efficiency, we worked very hard to optimize the efficiency of the district, not just in building utilization, but I'm not sure that I've ever seen where we worked hard on transportation and making sure that we stayed within the board's guidelines for bus rides and that kind of thing. And if a bus goes this way, does it have a way to go out? And all of those things. We spent a lot of time looking at efficiency. And finally, community. I felt like we were very transparent from the beginning to the end. We did nothing in secret. In a minute, I'm going to tell you we had multiple meetings. Everything we did, we presented to the public and to you guys through the process. It says there under community that we are sensitive to the needs of the families, the communities, and the district. We tried to be sensitive to everyone involved, but the ultimate goal was the needs of the district. We look at the school district as a whole. That's what we felt totally responsible for that. And as we've said before, the balance, or the four guiding principles all through the process would conflict with one another. We often use the Jell-O analogy that if you push on one side, then it jiggled on the other side and that kind of thing. Sometimes we didn't achieve what we wanted to achieve. So those bullets at the top, it really came out, especially in this last version, the superintendent's recommendation. Okay? The desired outcomes were developed very early on, obviously because you were opening new schools and adding additional seats. So one of the desired outcomes was to develop the assignment plan for the 3 elementary schools that opened in 2021 and 21-22. We had some unresolved business when we opened McDeeds Creek. We said that through that year that we would come back and revisit that, because the first year of the multi-year assignment plan, we were careful to not make any changes in attendance areas outside of Area 1. You remember that. And we said, oh, we're coming back to this. So that was a desired outcome now for this second year. We have come back to it. And then the advisory council that was established, actually they developed these last 2 bullets to the extent possible. Look at all the schools at the elementary and middle school level and do the best we can to balance utilization across the district, and to the extent possible, balance demographics across the elementary and middle schools. So those were our desired outcomes. Our process was very iterative. We began, if you'll remember back, and Mr. Weaver, you weren't here, but we began with the advisory council, which was made up of, I want to say, 60 members. It was quite a large committee. We were all pretty awestruck by the fact that we were going to have a committee of 60 people. But it was school leadership, every school was represented, school staff, every school had staff represented, and every school had parents represented on this advisory committee. And so we began the process by showing them 2 scenarios. One was based totally on utilization, and the other was based on
utilization and paying attention to feeder patterns.
paying attention to
maintaining
feeder patterns. And we showed them if you let the computer drive everything, you get some pretty, I love this term, you get some pretty wonky results, okay? And so from those two scenarios, we moved forward and we started developing draft one. We took that out to the community for feedback. We went back to the drawing table with staff and the advisory committee. We came back with draft two, okay? We went out to the community for feedback. We had great community input, not just at those meetings, but online. You guys got emails, I think staff got emails and stale mail input, all kinds of input, probably at the grocery store, that kind of thing. So every time we'd get the feedback, we would revisit. And so we sit here today then with the superintendent's recommendation. And I will say, you know I've done this a lot, but I feel like this team at this table has done an excellent job working together and really developing what they felt was the best recommendation for you guys. And the advisory committee, I just thought those were just the most top-notch people in the district working on this. And then your parents. Your parents, I mean, there's some that disagreed clearly, but in the end, they worked together, they gave good feedback, and I was just real pleased with working with Moore County Schools and the folks of Moore County. Wouldn't you say that, Mike?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So all the meetings we had, we thought we'd brag about it a little bit. We did have 7 advisory committee meetings, and I told you that was a committee of 60 people, and it went really well. I feel like if you talk to any one of them, they will tell you that they felt worthwhile, that they felt like their input was heard, and I think they had their eyes opened to the complexity of the process. Okay, we had 4 community input meetings that were very well attended by parents, and again, I really felt that the layout of those meetings went real well. They had time to look at maps and really dig in and talk to each of us individually, and I think everybody walked away from that feeling like I had an opportunity to share and provide feedback. Dr. Bob had 3 community forums. We've had 3 presentations to you before today, and then there, of course, there was a host of online feedback that all went into the process.
Thank you, Laura. Well, let's remember one of the reasons that we're here is we have 4 new elementary, K-5 elementary schools in the district. The first is opening this year, 2019-20, McDeeds Creek, with a capacity of 800 seats. That's 800 new seats for the district, and that gave the opportunity to look at how we might look at utilization for the entire district. On the heels of McDeeds Creek, we have a consolidation of K2 and 3-5 schools in Aberdeen and in Southern Pines. And Aberdeen actually raises capacity to about 800. The new school will have a capacity of 800. Same for Southern Pines. And finally, a new facility replacing Pinehurst Elementary, again with a increase in capacity. So all these new seats enabled us to really take a hard look at how the schools were being utilized. How our elementary schools could be balanced, or could we consider scenarios that balance that utilization and pay attention to the guiding principles that we've already been over. So this is the big driver behind the work that we've been doing over the last couple of years. One of the guiding principles concerned using the most up-to-date data from planning departments. And as we have said before, the basis for the forecasts was actually produced almost 2 years ago from ORED at NC State University. There was a comprehensive survey of developments throughout the entire county at that point. Those developments were cataloged in a geodatabase, and those numbers directly influenced where the growth would occur and when. Since that time, we were informed of new developments. The purpose of the guiding principles, one of the things was to keep track of that, use the up-to-date data as it becomes available. So there are 2 new developments included in this forecast that were not present in the ORED study of 2 years ago. And I'll briefly describe these two developments. The first is Blake Village in the...
Blake Village or Blake Station?
Blake Village, yeah. In the current Area 3, over 119, on a parcel of 119 acres with mixed-use residential, estimating a 10-year build-out with 362 total units and just over 1,000 total bedrooms. The estimated K-12 student yield upon build-out, upon that 10-year build-out, is somewhere between 150 and 200 Moore County school students. That's the pink one in the map. An unnamed development sitting on what we call the Martin property, also currently located in Area 3, has a total of 551 total lots or units. Again, mixed use with 211 townhomes, 201 single-family small lot residential houses, and 139 single-family large lot houses. Again, we're estimating a 10-year build-out for that, and the estimated student yield is between 300 and 350 K-12 students. And I will note that this one is directly adjacent to the new site for the Aberdeen area elementary school. So we feel very confident that development especially will produce kids that will impact your school district and Aberdeen.
And what was the student yield for that site?
300 to 350.
Okay, got it, yeah.
And I'll just mention again that about the month of July or so, when we began to know the details on these developments, we put that data back into the forecast. So these developments and the student yields you see from there are in the forecast that you're seeing today.
Just want to remind the board and everybody some of the things that we had done previously to get to an understanding on efficiencies and on impacts as we planned possible assignment to areas. Ramey Kemp and Associates, a traffic engineering company out of Raleigh, we had brought on board to consult with us to take a look at our routing and our opportunities we have. We knew coming in that we have a lot of congestion in the center part of the county here. Around the Pinehurst, Aberdeen, Southern Pines area. Known facts, DOT is already in the works of getting major project improvements on US 1 and 15501 in place and looking at some turn lane widening on 5. So Ramey Kemp came in, and these are some of the key corridor segments that they studied. At the very top, where all the arrows convene together, in the center, that is the roundabout up in Pinehurst. To the lower right of that, 15501 leaves that, heads all the way down to 1, and so we studied that leg of the segment there, kind of a corridor. And then to the left, the entire Route 5 corridor that connects from 211 all the way down to US 1. And so the dots along those represent the segments along those corridors that the following charts will reference. When you go to the chart here on the traffic study, it might be a little hard to see on the screen, but here's how you get the data and understand what you're reading. At the top, we'll start with the roundabout up in Pinehurst there. The very top item is Route 15501 southbound going into the roundabout. So what they looked at was the time delay the vehicle as it enters the queue, which is the stacking length of cars when momentum comes to a slowdown or a halt, all the way to the point it enters into the flow of the circle. Now this is assuming that they're going to go somewhere else other than westbound on 211, because that has a continuous right opportunity. Our study took a look at the impact of getting through the circle to a second, third, or fourth exit on all directions. So when you look at that coming from the north, going south on 15501, the segment travel time was 234 seconds at its peak. And so you can see down as you read through these, all 5 directions coming into the roundabout. So you have the opposite coming from 15501 going north into the roundabout at 192 seconds. The shortest one is it's the Midland Road coming eastbound into it. Very low traffic volume on that road, and it had a 10-second peak segment travel time delay. On the far right, under the comments, it also identified when these peak times occurred. And most of the time, what we see is these occurred during the commute times for going to work, et cetera. So from 7:30 a.m. to 8 a.m. is the peak time for the roundabout when they encountered this. Now, that also lets us know any impact we have regarding routing for elementary schools with the bell schedules in the middle and then the high schools later, those impacts that travel may have. So that's kind of how you read through the data on that chart there. We also took a look at our bus routing from last year and took a look at all the route times and broke them by the attendance area, by the grade level school, and also as a district. And so we categorized looking at our maximum route time, our minimum route times, our average and our medians. And so you can see how they read across the chart there. These became some of the metrics we used when we evaluated potential impacts to travel to certain schools. And that's what the next map's referenced. So we take a look at, this is an example of an area that was presented to the board earlier that that was in consideration of going to one school or another. And so the comparison was looking at the base point of J. Dowdy Road, just outside, between Carthage and Robbins area, and looking at what the difference is in the travel time from that area using bus transportation to get to either Carthage or to get to Robbins. And you will see that their study resulted in the same amount of time, 52 minutes for Carthage and 52 for Robbins. The chart is included on each slide so you can see where this falls relative to comparison of Area 1, which had an average time of just over an hour, and Area 2, an hour and 10 minutes, and the district-wide average of an hour and 6 minutes. So you can see kind of with each little study that we did, looking at the chart to see how it compared through there. And so we did the same thing when we looked at Eagle Springs and the possibility that instead of going to West End, looking at the Robbins Elementary attendance, and again, looking at the routing changes, and here it showed a 10-minute difference in there. So when you look at the Area 1 and 2 comparisons, because or Area 1 and 3 comparisons, the Robbins is in Area 1, and West End is in Area 3. You can see that the hour and 23 is just a little more than the average, but it's well under any maximum times. And when you look at the district-wide average of an hour and 6 minutes, it is slightly more than that for this transportation, so it falls close within it. Looking at Foxfire Community and its opportunity, whether it's potentially changing from West Pine to Aberdeen, it's the same thing. You look at the time, and the actual commute time with the bus for both was a 0-minute difference. So it was an hour and 20 minutes to either. Now that's higher than what we have seen in our Area 3 when you look at your average, but it is below the maximum, and it's like about 22 minutes more than the average for the district-wide. Village Acres Community, again, taking a look at whether West Pine Current or Southern Middle potential. Again, you look at the difference between there was a 5-minute difference between going to either school, and that is well under the Area 3 and the district-wide averages. The next one is Pinehurst number 6 Community. Same thing, when you take a look at going from one to the other, it's almost negligible between them, and that travel time is well within, lower than Area 3 and district-wide. We also looked at area by Pinehurst Lake, and looking at West Pine Middle and Southern Middle. And in this one, again, the travel distance time was 0, and the time is just, again, slightly more than Area 3 and 10 minutes more than the district-wide average would be, well within the levels. This is a new one. We didn't have this last time for the board. This was where we're taking a look at potentially Southern Pines, looking at that community, currently at Southern Middle and potential Cranes Creek. And so looking at the impact to the routing on the buses for these, it was a 10-minute difference between them from going to Southern Middle and going to Cranes Creek, an hour and 15 minutes, which is slightly more again, and then the Area 1 and Area 3 in the district-wide, but well within levels of that.
These are route times.
And these are route times, yes.
So anybody that actually drives that, it's not gonna take that long, but this
No.
includes what it would take to drive around and pick kids up.
That's correct. Full bus route. Another new slide you didn't have last time was this impact in Northeast Moore County. This is the area north of Carthage. And that community going currently to Carthage Elementary and potentially looking at the High Falls area. And you will see the difference between those is on about 7 minutes. And the time for these routes is right there pretty much within what you see is the averages for areas 1 and area 2 and the district-wide. So we had these performed by Ramey Kemp to help give us information, data, and understanding. One of the other elements that has come up in some questions was about defining what is capacity at a school. Long time ago, we talked about this at the board presentation, but just to remind everybody, when we talk about school capacity, what it is we mean. The first definition of school capacity is a core. This is the number of students that a building's core elements are able to serve. These are support spaces such as cafeteria, toilet facilities, a media center, circulation gym. Those are those areas of the school that compose or make up the core of it. The other capacity is what we call classroom capacity, and this is the number that can be accommodated by classrooms that are built at a school. Now, in some cases, you may find they're not equal. In a lot of cases, we find they're not the same at every school. And the capacities that we select is the lower of the two because that's what's driving those facilities. So if we have a core capacity at a school, that's 500, and we have a classroom built capacity out there through many years and maybe additions of 700, you have a core is really the striving number for there. You also have the inverse that happens, where you have a core that may be 700, and you have classrooms that are only built for 400. So then you're restricted to those classrooms that you actually have. It does provide opportunity in our master facilities planning to identify opportunities at schools to expand and create larger cores or more classrooms to increase capacities at the schools. One of the recommendations we have that Dr. Grimsey referenced in the beginning of the plan here is what to do with our mobile units. Fortunately, with the construction of the new schools, we have modular units that are going to be available to use at places to bring temporary relief where possible. We have 8 units available from Pinehurst Elementary School. We had 6 available from Farm Life. And between those 2 schools, we have 5 that are in poor condition that are not usable and not worth reinvesting in. So what we'd already done with the project at Northmore High School, as you'll recall, we had to relocate the modular units there and shut down one of the buildings. So we had to move the modular units from Farm Life to Northmore and set them up to accommodate classes up there until the addition is complete. Once the addition is complete, all those modular units become available. So at Pinehurst Elementary School, we have an opportunity to move 8 units to a place to bring us temporary capacity relief. And then also at the end of the project at Northmore, additional mobile units that will be available to move to bring relief at some schools. So this chart outlines a draft of the plan, and when we get through Dr. Grimsey's discussion here, you'll see how they play into one another.
John, can you just explain, and this might be helpful for the audience, what surplus sale is?
Surplus sale, this is for units that are, again, poor condition, that are not worth reinvestment. We will have them declared by a surplus and then sold off to any parties interested in buying them.
Michael? Board members, the proposed final plan for student assignment is district-wide in scope. As such, it seeks to address issues across Moore County. However, the Moore County Schools story, if you will, is comprised of 21 different stories for each of the affected schools and their respective communities. This next segment of our presentation addresses each of those 21 school stories. Each story includes the school's capacity and what its enrollment will look like if we take no action, and what its enrollment will look like if this proposed plan is employed. Let's begin with our Northern Moore schools that feed into Northmore High School. In each school, we will show that the challenge is declining enrollment and underutilization, but the opportunity is that our Northern Moore schools provide space for us to reassign students and relieve overcrowding among some of our Southern Moore schools. The first slide is High Falls Elementary School, which serves grades K through 8. Note that the red line signifies the school's capacity at 400 students. The orange bars signify that enrollment will linger at 250 or below if no action is taken. The blue bars illustrate that enrollment would be at or above 300 if the proposed plan is approved. High Falls would receive those students from Carthage Elementary and New Century Middle. Now, before I move on, does anybody have any questions about how the chart or the graph works? Orange is if we do nothing, blue is if we adopt the proposed plan. All right, we'll proceed. Westmore Elementary School also serves K through 8, and it also has a capacity of 400 students. Its projected enrollment patterns are similar to those of High Falls. If left alone, the orange bars indicate that projected enrollment would be about 280 or below. The blue bars show that the proposed plan would boost it to 300 or slightly above. Westmore would receive those students from Robbins Elementary and East Middle School. East Middle School's capacity is 270 students. The orange bars show that projected enrollment will drop below 200 if no realignment occurs. The blue bars show the proposed plan would buoy projected enrollment between 210 and 250. Elise would receive those students from West Pine and New Century Middle Schools. Robbins Elementary School's capacity is 600. The orange bars show projected enrollment at or below 400. The blue bars show the proposed plan will sustain enrollment above 400 students and could push it up closer to 500 over the next 8 years. Robbins would receive those students from Carthage and West End Elementary. Now we begin our trek from west to east across the Area 3 elementary schools that will feed into Pinecrest High School, that have traditionally fed into Pinecrest High School. We'll need to align the stories of West Pine, Southern, Cranes Creek, and New Century Middle Schools later. Right now our focus will be on the elementary schools. So our first stop is West End Elementary School, which, by the way, let me say, has presented the Planning Committee with one of its most significant challenges. As you can see, West End's capacity is 500. The orange bars show West End to be over capacity already, and that it is projected to continue to grow consistently through the next 8 years, even eclipsing 600 students within 7 years. The blue bars illustrate how the proposed plan can hold the enrollment much closer to the school's capacity. West End's projected enrollment would be relieved by sending students to West Pine and Robbins elementary schools. Even with realignment of boundaries, however, West End Elementary's enrollment will require annual monitoring. You see, the challenge at West End goes beyond the numbers. And so for that reason, I'd like to ask Mr. Barath to review the factors that he presented to you during your August 5th work session that are very pertinent to our consideration. Mr. Barath.
Thank you, Dr. Grimsey. To remind the board, this is the property out at West End Elementary School. 211 is going diagonal across the screen there. Kind of hard to see the lines, but outlined in red is the property. Near the top part of that is where the school sits. And then you can see a bare patch, which is where the playground and play structures are. And then at the bottom of that box, you see a ball field. Coming around the right side of that box is the entry drive for queuing and dropping off of students and picking them up. That is entered off of Love Grove Church Road, not accessed off of 211. 211 is where buses enter and exit the site. So you have a very linear site here running along 211. turning off the aerial, make it a little easier to see, but these contour lines help to tell the story. Each contour line represents 2 feet of vertical change. So you can see where the school is built, it was kind of on the plateau front side of the site, which was up against 211, and then kind of run linear along it, not back where the site drops off. From the school down to the back is about 38 feet of fall heading to the back down there. The topography lines make it challenging, not impossible, because as the school is already aware, Southern Pines Elementary School site is also built on a challenging site. However, this would entail a major construction project to add any capacity to the school running out that way. There we go. So to further discuss some of the constraints of it, to zoom in a little closer, you can see where the building footprints are out there. You see the dashed line represents where the topography begins to break. We do not have the opportunity to put any modular units outside of that line because they will be on a steep hillside. We are restricted. We already have 2 modular units in the front of the school facing 211, and there is the opportunity to put another 2 in that same courtyard and cap it off. We have a parking lot for visitors and staff and pick-up drop-off here, so that restricts the opportunity to put anything on that lot. We have some hard surface play area, which the EC children and the school uses during times when it's wet and saturated out there. We also have the play area with the playground structures right there, which limits our ability to put any units out there. This is a restrictive site, which makes it very challenging to try to increase any capacity, whether it's classroom or core, at this location. And again, the area that we had presented just earlier, Eagle Springs, looking at the opportunities from West End Elementary going to Robbins Elementary or Alice, you're looking at a 10-minute difference in that window for bus circulation traffic.
Mr. Brass?
Yes.
And it's my understanding that 211 in front of the school is to be widened, is that correct?
It is.
So the front of the school area will be impacted somewhat.
And we have met with DOT and have seen their plans for it, and it does not impact into any of our parking or anything. It is in that lawn area in the front.
Safe to say that it makes it tighter, but it doesn't add any further complexity. It does cause us some concern that traffic's going to be that close to the parking lot, but it doesn't really affect the realignment of school boundaries. Thank you, Mr. Barath. Continuing on, we see West Pine Elementary School's capacity is 600. The orange bars show the current enrollment to be right at capacity, and if no realignment takes place, the projected enrollment is forecast to be well above capacity and even push towards 800 within 8 years. The blue bars illustrate how the proposed plan will mitigate the rate of enrollment growth by sending a modest number of students to Aberdeen and a much larger number of students to Pinehurst. Here's another way to illustrate the difference. The next slide, if you will, displays 12 modular classrooms that could be needed to accommodate the orange bars. The next slide displays the campus if the proposed plan is employed. No modular classrooms. Essentially, West Pine Elementary could become the next Sandhills Farm Life overcrowded scenario within the next 5 years if we don't take action very soon. Next is Pinehurst Elementary School. Its current capacity is 367, and as everyone knows, it has become so overcrowded that 40% of the student body was educated in modular classrooms. The new Pinehurst Elementary School will have a capacity of 800 students. As you can see, the new capacity would be adequate for the projected enrollment if no action was taken. The new capacity of that new school would be adequate for the projected enrollment if no action was taken. However, Pinehurst Elementary School's story does not exist in a vacuum. Its story would be easy to write if the new school could simply serve the children currently assigned to it. Given what we knew about projected enrollments at West End and West Pine Elementary Schools, the committee concluded that an eastward migration of enrollment would be necessary. So when we compare the orange bars with the blue bars in this illustration, we must understand that the blue bars represent a different population of students, with some moving to Pinehurst from West Pine and some moving out of Pinehurst to Southern Pines. Aberdeen Elementary School's current capacity of 725 includes the combined spaces of the old Aberdeen primary and elementary schools. That capacity will grow to 800 with the opening of the new school. The graph shows much similarity in the growth pattern among the orange and blue bars, with adequate capacity for both projections over the next 8 years. Still, Aberdeen will remain a school where the enrollment must be closely monitored on an annual basis. The Aberdeen Town Council's recent approval of the Martin property development is included in this projection, as Mike indicated earlier. Indeed, build-out of the Martin property is what pushes up the projection in 2025 through 2029. With other southern communities approaching build-out status, Aberdeen is a community that is showing increased development interest. Aberdeen also is the school district that has some of our highest levels of family participation in homeschooling and charter schools. Due to these factors, the committee recommends only modest changes in the boundaries that surround Aberdeen, and that explains why the patterns of orange and blue bars are very similar. The next two slides sort of work together, and I'm going to let Mr. Miller toggle back and forth as he sees the need, okay? The stories of Southern Pines and McDeeds Creek Elementary Schools are intertwined. Both will serve 800 students, and both are located within the current town limits of Southern Pines. Together, they serve as major drivers of both our obligation to realign school boundaries and our capacity to achieve that realignment. The combined current capacity of the Southern Pines primary and elementary schools is 990, with a combined current enrollment that represents just above 60% of that capacity. So the committee had to be mindful of the fact that the capacity of the new school would be 190 seats less than the combined capacity of the two outdated schools that it was replacing. That said, the orange bars illustrate that the new school will offer adequate capacity for students who currently are assigned to the existing schools. But like Pinehurst Elementary School, however, the story of the new Southern Pines School cannot be told in a vacuum. As previously shown, students will be reassigned from Pinehurst Elementary to provide space for it to receive students from West Pine. Aberdeen's substantial potential enrollment restricts its ability to serve that role. So the new Southern Pine School becomes the only option to receive students from Pinehurst. And that's where the extra capacity at McDeeds Creek comes into play. Therefore, similar to the Pinehurst Elementary School story, the orange and blue bars in this Southern Pines illustration represent a different population of students, with some moving in from Pinehurst and others moving out to McDeeds Creek. It is McDeeds Creek's 800 student enrollment that obligates and enables the west to east migration of students from West Pine into Pinehurst and from Pinehurst into Southern Pines. The orange bars illustrate how McDeeds Creek's enlarged capacity already has resolved overcrowding at Sandhills Farm Life and Vast Lakeview elementary schools. There also are already some Southern Pines students included in those orange bars at McDeeds Creek. If no other students are assigned to McDeeds Creek, however, we risk underutilizing the school. So the proposed plan uses McDeeds Creek to receive students from Southern Pines, which allows it to receive students from Pinehurst, which allows it to receive students from West Pine. In the end, we can see that the blue bars still project McDeeds Creek's enrollment to be well within its capacity 8 years out. Before we continue, it's important to note that McDeeds Creek also established two other precedents that impact the stories of Moore County's schools. First, McDeeds Creek joins Cameron this year as our second elementary school that feeds into at least 2 middle schools. Second, McDeeds Creek is now the first elementary school from which students eventually will attend 2 different high schools. More details about feeder patterns will be shared momentarily. Our trek now progresses across the Area 1 elementary schools that currently feed into Union Pines High School. We begin with Sandhills Farm Life Elementary. As you can see, Sandhills Farm Life has experienced significant improvement with the opening of McDeeds Creek. The orange bars illustrate that the enrollment that now allows for the inevitable continued growth of the Whispering Pines and southern Carthage areas. With the exception of some modest boundary line adjustments with Carthage, Cameron, Vass Lakeview, and McDeeds Creek, the blue bars illustrate how the proposed plan manages the expected growth at Sand Hills Farm Life. Carthage Elementary School's capacity is 440. The orange bars illustrate that the school can manage its projected growth for at least the next 6 years. The blue bars show how the proposed plan shifts some Carthage students to Robbins and High Falls. That movement allows Carthage then to receive some students from Cameron, which in turn enables Cameron to receive some students from Vass Lakeview. Throughout the next 8 years, Carthage's projected enrollment remains within its capacity under the proposed plan. Cameron Elementary has a core capacity of 400 students, but its classroom capacity is only 284. That means that its official selected capacity is restricted to the 284 students that are restricted by the classroom capacity. The committee concluded that Cameron will become a necessary factor to relieve continued growth at Vass Lakeview Elementary School. Therefore, the proposed plan includes the placement of a 6-classroom modular facility, complete with bathrooms and a teacher workroom, at Cameron for the 2021-22 school year. As of now, the plan is to move the current 6-classroom modular facility at Northmore High School upon completion of that school's new addition. The modular classroom facility will increase, albeit temporarily, the selected capacity of Cameron to 400 students, which is going to be aligned with its core capacity. The orange bars illustrate that additional classroom space will be needed at Cameron with or without the alignment of school boundaries. With its capacity increased to 400, the blue bars show the proposed plan allows Cameron to relieve projected growth at Vass Lakeview while remaining within its own core capacity. Vass Lakeview Elementary School's capacity is 600 students. The orange bars show that its enrollment dropped by about 80 to 90 students with the opening of McDeeds Creek this fall. However, the orange bars also show that Vass Lakeview's enrollment is projected to grow consistently over the next 8 years as communities bordering Fort Bragg in the extreme eastern Moore County continue to expand. The blue bars reflect the proposed plan's shifts of students from the western end of the Vass Lakeview district to Sand Hills Farm Life in Cameron. Despite those moves, Vass Lakeview is still projected to reach its enrollment capacity again within 8 years. Fortunately, Vass Lakeview is a rare example of one of our schools where its core capacity may be expanded. So a future school board could have the option to expand Vass Lakeview to 800 students if it becomes necessary. The 4 middle schools in southern Moore County serve as feeders to Pinecrest and Union Pines high schools. Their stories also are intertwined and must be understood in the context of their shared challenges and capabilities. Together, they presented the committee with another one of its most significant challenges. This slide presents the shared dilemma. The orange bars show that the combined projected enrollment of West Pine, Southern, Cranes Creek, and New Century middle schools already is slightly above their combined capacity. West Pine, Southern, and New Century each have capacities of 700. Cranes Creek's selected capacity is restricted to 478 due to the fact that its classroom capacity is below its core capacity. The combined current capacity of the 4 middle schools is 2,578. The proposed plan calls for the use of modular classrooms to align Cranes Creek's classroom capacity of 478 with its core capacity of 700 by the fall of 2021. That move will increase the combined capacity of the 4 schools to 2,800. Even with that expansion, the combined projected enrollment will exceed the combined capacity as early as 2024. We begin now with West Pine Middle School, where the orange bars illustrate a coming crisis that cannot be ignored. Student enrollment already exceeds capacity by over 100 students, and it is expected to grow unabated through 2028-29 when it is projected to exceed capacity by 400 students. The blue bars demonstrate how the proposed plan provides a more balanced alternative. While the blue bars illustrate that the projected enrollment still will exceed capacity as early as 2024-25, the proposed plan distributes the growth across the 4 middle schools. Here's another way to illustrate the dilemma that confronts West Pine Middle School. The next slide shows that as many as 20 modular classrooms could be needed to accommodate the orange bars. The next slide displays the campus if the proposed plan is employed. Little to no change in the current 6 modular classrooms. If there is no change to the projected enrollment at West Pine Middle, the demands on the cafeteria, media center, gymnasium, hallways, driveways, and parking lots could become almost impossible to manage. Next, we go to Southern Middle School, where the orange bars show that Southern will have a modest amount of capacity and is projected to experience modest growth. The blue bars illustrate how Southern Middle School can receive students from West Pine Middle. It's important to note, however, that Southern Middle School does not have adequate capacity to serve the number of students that must be reassigned out of West Pine Middle. So it'll be important for students from Southern Middle to migrate to Cranes Creek in order to create the necessary capacity. The graph shows how the additional, now we move on to Cranes Creek, where the graph shows how the addition of modular classrooms can align Cranes Creek's classroom capacity to its core capacity, thus expanding its ability to serve up to 700 students. That expansion enables Cranes Creek to receive students from Southern Middle, which enables Southern Middle to receive more students from West Pine. The orange bars reflect a modest projected growth rate at Cranes Creek, which further justifies its availability to receive students from Southern Middle. The blue bars illustrate how the proposed plan depends on Cranes Creek to assist with the essential migration of students west to east from West Pine, across Southern, and into Cranes Creek. The next slide shows how modular classrooms may be arrayed in a way that expands Cranes Creek's capacity from just under 478 to its core capacity of 700. As explained by Mr. Barath, we can begin to move 8 of the, we can begin to move 8 of those units to Cranes Creek from Pinehurst Elementary in the coming weeks and months. The final 5 would come from Northmore High School upon its the completion of the new addition. So the blue ones would be the ones that we would relocate during 1920, and the yellow ones would be the ones we would add in the year right before the move would take place. Next, New Century Middle School's capacity is also 700. The orange bars show how the projected enrollment would exceed that capacity by 2023. The blue bars show how routing some students to Elise and High Falls could moderate that enrollment growth and provide some balance between New Century and Cranes Creek. The final 3 slides illustrate the stories of our 3 high schools. The modest shifts of some students from Pinecrest and Union Pines to Northmore will provide measurable improvement in utilization at Northmore, but the moves really yield very little benefit for Pinecrest and Union Pines. The graph shows how the new Northmore addition will align the classroom capacity with the core capacity. The orange bars show how continuous enrollment, the orange bars indicate that there will be continuous enrollment decline. The blue bars illustrate how the proposed plan will slow down that decline, but not eliminate it. The graphs for Pinecrest and Union Pines both underscore the importance of continued vigilance and advocacy in the board's planning for capital modernization and expansion of both of these schools. It is important to recall that the expansions at Pinecrest and Union Pines, as well as the construction of an advanced career center, were once ranked number 1, 2, and 3 on the original capital construction plan that was approved by the school board in the spring of 2014. Given very little impact on both high schools in the proposed plan, we see a near alignment between the orange and blue bars for both Pinecrest and Union Pines. And that is not good news for the future. Enrollment remains well over capacity at both schools, and both schools will remain heavily dependent on modular classrooms. That concludes our review of the individual school stories. I'll now yield to Mr. Miller and Ms. Evans, but the chair outranks Mr. Miller and Ms. Evans. So
And I
Chair
was-
Wallen-Miller.
I was going to recommend a 5-minute break before we get into your presentation, since I'd like to get that in one piece.
1-6.
5 minutes, board members? All right, call recess.
Okay.
Call the meeting back to order. Proceed. Thank you very much for allowing us a moment to break.
At this point, we would like to present the superintendent's recommendation for multi-year student assignment covering school years 2020-21, 2021-22. The table that you are looking at right now is similar in format to those you've seen in Draft 1 and Draft 2, with a couple changes that I will note in a moment. I would ask you to, as you study these, make sure that you look at every school. As Dr. Grimacy has mentioned, these moves are not made in isolation. When you move a line for a school, you are also moving a line for the adjacent school. And in the case of Moore County, in the elementary schools and in the middle schools, there were 4 and 5 schools that needed to be connected in order to get some kind of balance of utilization. So it's important, even though there's a lot of data here and it's in a kind of an unreadable or not a very easily read format, it's very important that you study each of these schools and understand how their utilization and other metrics have changed under the proposed plan. We will start with the elementary schools, and as usual, looking to the far right, I will call your attention to the range of utilization as compared to the current attendance area lines and the superintendent's recommendation. For the current lines, the maximum utilization is 117 and the minimum is 61. That's a range of 56 points. The superintendent's recommendation closes that range to 27 points. This is a significant balance of utilization across the district. So again, this is not just a 1 or 2 school study. This is looking at the entire district and how we can look at all of the opportunities that are available to us to balance utilization. I'll call your attention to the second outlined box, utilization 22-23. Since we started on Draft 1, our target year for the data tables has been 2022-23. That is 1 year after full implementation of the proposed plan. For this particular table, we've also added utilizations in 24-25 and 28-29. So those are some new pieces of information on the presentation. I'll call your attention to the utilization in 22-23 for McDeeds Creek. Under the current lines, we would look at a utilization of about 67%. One of the desired outcomes of this proposed plan is to take care of that unresolved business from last year, from Area 1. And that's to properly utilize McDeeds Creek. The proposed plan takes McDeeds Creek from 67% to a utilization of 84% in 22-23. The story doesn't end there. If you skip over 2 columns, you'll see the utilization is projected to be 94% in 2028. This is an area where there is every indication that growth will continue and continue to produce students that will go into your district.
And just as a reminder, Mr. Miller, the current McDeeds Creek contains just students from Sandhills Farm Life and Vast Lakeview, the current utilization.
That is correct.
So that's the current opening when we opened last week. It's
That
just
is
those 2 schools. Okay.
Oh, yes, yes. You'll also notice the shaded area in the bottom table. Let me explain what's happening there. As I mentioned, this plan is to be implemented over 2020, 21, and then the following year, 2021-22. The models we are using for forecasting have the assumption that the proposed plan would take effect in this current year. So I shaded those boxes out because those numbers are not relevant to where we're looking at in the target year. The plan will not be implemented in 2019, and only portions of the plan will be implemented in 2020, 21. So these numbers are shaded to remind us that's not a relevant year for the forecast and the proposed plan. If you go down to almost the bottom of the current chart and look at West End and West Pine, Dr. Grimacy has mentioned several times that one of the foremost challenges in this plan was to try to tie together and properly utilize West End, West Pine Elementary, and Pinehurst. This was a challenge for the planning team, starting with draft 1. But I think that the superintendent's recommendation for elementary schools goes a long way in achieving the kind of utilization balance that we were looking at from the first. West End goes from a utilization in 22-23 of 115 down to 97 under the proposed plan. West Pine goes from 117% down to 89% under the proposed plan. We feel like this plan does an excellent job of looking across the entire district, addressing overcrowded and underutilized schools where they currently exist, and balancing that utilization between all schools. Before we move to the map, does anybody have any questions on the table, on the data table?
Especially the West Pine utilization really speaks to trying to shift and just make sure that the utilization overall is coming down. That's great.
Moving to the next slide. As presented in draft 1 and draft 2, the maps you are seeing in front of you portray the current attendance lines as of 2019-20. So this includes McDeeds Creek. And then the superintendent's recommendation for elementary schools implemented in years 2020-21 and 2021-22. The red lines correspond to the current attendance boundaries for elementary schools. I'll call your attention to a few major moves that you'll notice from this map. And first of all, if you look at Northmore, High Falls and Robbins are coming far beyond their red line boundaries that they have currently. So this was a direct effort to try to better utilize the schools in the northern part of the district. And the only way we can do that is to bring those boundaries down to the south a little bit more. Some of those areas are not densely populated, so you have to go quite a ways to get the kind of numbers that we are looking at now. I'll also call your attention to Vast Lakeview. The planning team struggled over every iteration to try to produce a plan that would accommodate future growth that we know is coming to Vast Lakeview. As you know, Vast Lakeview has a unique geometry. There are some geographical challenges in for the Vast Lakeview district, and we feel like the current plan does as much as we can to the utilization for Vast Lakeview without encroaching on the school itself. One other note, and we'll move to the middle schools. We have talked about McDeeds Creek and how this plan is providing some resolution that we looked at in last year's plan, opening McDeeds Creek. McDeeds Creek is the light blue area, and you'll notice that it moves down towards Southern Pines in the proposed plan. That's part of that balancing utilization that we've been working with over the entire process.
May I just ask a point of clarification, and you may have said it and I missed it, but the red lines on the right-hand side of the map, those are the current lines? Okay,
That's correct. So the red lines in each map are identical.
okay. It's helpful to see it that way, so thank you, even if it's small.
And one last thing I mentioned, thank you, Laura, for reminding me. You can also see a fairly significant decrease in the base area of West End Elementary. This is another area that the planning team was struggling. It's kind of a linchpin because there's not much you can do for that very compact community that is still growing. So we felt it was very important to try to accommodate for that future growth and the current crowding at West End Elementary by making its base more compact. And I believe that's kind of a teal, light blue color there. You can see how that boundary is significantly smaller than it is currently. Anything to add? Any questions on this set of maps? The next slide is slide 58, and this is to illustrate some of the challenges and solutions to these challenges that we're facing the planning team. The goal of balancing utilization was a very significant challenge throughout the entire district. The Jell-O thing happens all the time. You push a boundary on one side, and it's going to affect a school or two schools on the other side. So the goal, once again, being trying to accommodate what we project as future growth in balancing utilization between West End, West Pine Elementary, and Pinehurst. And what we're looking at here is an example of the kind of fine-tuning that was necessary to bring a balanced utilization to those schools. As Dr. Grimsey mentioned, we did a lot of work between Southern Pines, the new elementary school, K-5 school in Southern Pines, and McDeeds Creek. How can we best balance the utilization there? But that's not the end of the story. Southern Pines Elementary is adjacent to Pinehurst. Can we move any of that system in order to balance utilization? So this was a fairly challenging part of the process in looking at all the data that we had, keeping the guiding principles in mind, keeping the desired outcomes in mind to balance our schools for the next several years.
This one, though, is West Pine Elementary.
Yes, this illustrates the movement between West Pine Elementary in purple and Pinehurst in green. So it's a zoom in of the map that we were looking at a slide ago. Moving to middle schools. I think you're going to notice here that without building a new middle school, we've achieved a much greater balance of utilization, especially among the four middle schools in the southern area of the county. We do understand that Cranes Creek, the increase in capacity at Cranes Creek helped do that, and that allowed us to make some additional moves to really flesh out the kind of balancing that we're looking at in this table. And we'll go into those moves in a moment. Starting with a current utilization range of 83 points, the maximum utilization is West Pine Middle School at 141%, projected currently, with a minimum of 58% at Cranes Creek with that 700 capacity increase to 700, I should say. That range of 83 points decreases by 61 points to a range of 22 under the superintendent's recommendations for middle schools, a significant balancing and narrowing of utilizations across the district for middle schools. The increase in capacity at Cranes Creek was critical in this. It allowed us to take Cranes Creek and add the kind of students that would help Southern Middle School accommodate for growth that we're looking at over the future. And I will call attention once again, as we have done at every draft, the bottom line for your middle schools and for your high schools are there is going to be a need for more seats within the next decade. This plan does a very good job of balancing that utilization, but there's only so many seats, and those seats are going to be filled.
I have a question before we move on.
Yes, ma'am.
High Falls Elementary School, it went from 82% to 105. What was the factor in that?
2%.
Is that pulling it from?
Actually, yeah, there's two factors in there. That's 82 to 105. I think the first thing to remember is that High Falls in this data table is just the K-5. It's a smaller population. This is 6 through, I'm sorry, this is middle schools. 6 through 8, smaller population, so smaller changes can have a relatively large impact on the utilization. And the second part of this is, yes, what you're looking at is an increase in High Falls down into the area that used to be Carthage and New Century. Yes, ma'am. The maps in front of you, once again, show a comparison of current lines, meaning 2019-20 attendance boundaries for middle school. And then those same boundaries are showing up in the right map, on the right-hand side, over the superintendent's recommendation for middle schools. So I'll call your attention to a few things, and we'll get into a zoom in a little bit later. But I think that one of the more obvious things is, once again, Northmore has a significant increase in its base attendance area for middle schools, aligning with the elementary schools and with the high schools. So you'll see that movement on all three levels. And as before, it represents a pretty significant move down into the southern areas, more into the southern areas of the county. Secondly, I'll call your attention to the Cranes Creek movements in the proposed plan. The increased capacity to 700 for Cranes Creek allowed us to move much more into Southern Pines, enabling us to balance utilization between West Pine, better balance utilization between West Pine Middle, Southern Middle, Cranes Creek, and New Century. We spent a lot of time looking at those 4 southern middle schools, as Dr. Grimacy has already alluded to try to get some balance there, and we feel like this plan does just that. This is a zoom in into the Southern Pines area, and the reason this picture here is to give you some idea of what that increase in capacity at Cranes Creek Middle School allowed the planning team to accomplish. So the yellow line that you see there is the proposed middle school boundary. The yellow one, the kind of gold yellow. So pay attention to the outline in this case. The blue line represents the current high school lines, which did not change in this area. But this slide is here to illustrate how we're able to utilize Cranes Creek with those extra seats and capacity of 700 to come down into Southern Pines. And as John has described in his traffic study, look at the transportation distances between Southern Middle School and Cranes Creek for the people in this area. And we felt like this move was a fair move to balance utilization and also consider the transportation impacts for families that have to travel to Southern Middle and Cranes Creek Middle School.
How does the transportation corridor here help us or hurt us in this change? Oh, I'll look at Mr. Barath.
That would be the opportunity to use US 1. US 1 is open without traffic lights when you come out of Southern Pines all the way up to the exit in Vass to go to Cranes Creek. So that's a straight-through express opportunity for the bus, whereas the other directions the buses have to travel is they have to go through traffic light sequence after sequence after sequence moving south to get to Southern Middle School. And that is where Ramey Kemp said the net change occurred in the 10 minutes between the two.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions on the middle schools, we'll turn to high schools. As we've mentioned several times now, the only impacts to the high school districts were an increase in the base attendance area for Northmore High School, which is also seeing an increase in its capacity from 559 to 800. And this increase provided a 8-point, is it 10? Okay, 10-point utilization, better balance for Northmore, taking students from Pinecrest and Union Pines High School base attendance areas. So we felt this was the best attempt to try to get better utilized schools for Northmore. And I think the map on slide 63 really shows the point how Northmore High School base attendance areas and the K-5 and K-8 schools and 6-8 schools in Northmore really increased their base attendance area to better utilize the schools.
Slide 64 talks about feeder patterns. Historically, Moore County has had one split feeder pattern from elementary to middle. That was Cameron. This year, with the opening of McDeeds Creek, that introduced a second split feeder pattern from elementary to middle. And as time goes by, you're going to see more of that. And in the recommendation, we now have 5 elementary split feeder patterns, 5 elementary schools that go to 2 middle schools, and 2 middle schools that go to 2 high schools. One. I'm sorry.
Yeah, just one middle school.
I read that too. My apologies. This is a new phenomenon for Moore County, but we worked hard to avoid that, but it was not possible. It was not possible with where your county is growing, where the new location of McDeeds Creek is. So that, we wanted you to see the end result there, okay? All right, we've got some associated recommendations that we want to talk about. One is the implementation timeline, and the other is allowable transfer.
Before we go there, could you give us the 5 elementary schools with the recommendation that would be in the split feeder middle schools?
Yes, we can. Go back to the elementary map to see that.
At one point, they were on the top of my head, but no.
I know, mine too, and I can't remember that.
So Cameron and McDeeds Creek are
Cameron,
2.
McDeeds Creek, Sand Hills Farm Life,
Southern Pines
Southern Pines, yes.
Pinehurst.
And Pinehurst.
and Pinehurst.
That's it, 5.
Okay.
Thank you.
You want the 2 middle schools?
No,
Or the one?
Or the one.
One middle school.
Cranes Creek.
Cranes Creek. All right. Again, the associated recommendations that go along with the attendance areas are the implementation timeline and a slide about allowable transfers. Looking at the implementation timeline, this is a 2-year rollout, but in 2021, We spelled it out this way because we felt like this was the easiest for parents to understand, okay? And so we have a sending school on the left and a receiving school on the right. So in the superintendent's recommendation, there's an area of Cameron that is proposed to be assigned to Carthage. If that gets approved by the Board of Education, that will occur in the 2021 school year. And then there's the list of elementary moves. There are middle schools moves and high school moves. I will say that the middle and high school moves have to do with that movement into Northmore. Okay? There are moves that are in the proposal that can't take effect because there's still construction and things going on. And so those had to be put off to 21, 22. And so if you'll look there, and they happen in areas 1 and 3. There's anything moving from Pinehurst to Southern Pines or Pinehurst to West Pine has to be delayed because of the construction of at Pinehurst Elementary. And then West Pine to Pinehurst, and then Southern Pines to McDeeds Creek. All of that is contingent on that Pinehurst construction. And then the middle schools, these movements are contingent on getting that capacity change done at Cranes Creek. Okay, so these 8 moves will occur in the 21-22 school year. Any questions about the timeline? Okay. And then we talked very early on in the process, we talked about allowable transfers because this is something that came up with parents very early in the process. So we have 2 categories here we call proactive transfers and then rising grade transfers. So for proactive transfers, and this would happen for the 21-22 school year, if I know my child will change schools in 21-22, I can submit a transfer request and let them start there in 2021, okay? That way, particularly like if it's a 6th grader in 2021, they'll spend all 3 of their middle school years at the same school, okay? So this we felt like was very family friendly, the proactive transfers. And then rising grade transfers, if you're in a term, I always call it a terminating grade, which sounds so negative, but the graduating grade, I guess would be a better term, 5th grade at the elementary, 8th, and then at high school, 11th and 12th, that if you're rising into one of those grades and that change in school assignment is about to happen, then we're going to say we're not, we're not, horrible people. We feel like you should be allowed to finish out your years at the school you've been attending. So that would be an allowable transfer. Having these 2 categories of allowable transfers, though, does slow down the transition in your utilization. But I think the trade-off to being family-friendly is certainly well worth the slowdown, okay? So this is important because I think it's not a policy change. Dr. Bob, can you explain how that works?
It would be it's part of the recommended plan, and upon approval by the board, should that be included in the board's approval of the plan, then the policy committee would be asked to work out the details and later on bring back a formal policy revision. It's a 2-step process. First, there's approval of the plan, and then finally, there's validation by the policy committee after it works out some of the details. That which we're looking for?
Yes, yes. And then in both of those situations for allowable transfers, it needs to be understood that parents would be responsible for their own transportation, okay? Any questions about the allowable transfers or the implementation timeline?
And they'd be responsible for their own transportation until that time that they are at the school they're districted for, or they have graduated or promoted from that school.
That is correct.
Okay.
Once the buses
That's
start
right.
rolling that direction, then
Yes.
obviously they can register.
So the buses will start rolling the year that the implementation occurs.
Yes,
That's correct.
Thank you.
thank you.
Let me talk about the addendum first. Before I hand the microphone over to John, I would like to call your attention, the board's attention, to the addendum at the end of this presentation. As in draft 1 and draft 2, we've elected to provide as much data as we can behind the moves that were made. So as before, you will see a full data tables for all 3 levels. This is a forecast that was produced in March. This particular forecast, I will say, does not have the new developments in Aberdeen. This is simply for, just to call your attention to a forecast that we had used back in the spring before those developments occurred. We've also got the student density maps to give us an idea of how the population is distributed through the county. These were very helpful, especially in our dealing when we were with the advisory committee. It helped them understand that it's a little more complicated than assuming the students are just uniformly all over the county. We got high density areas and density that's very sparse. And finally, there's a couple tables of transfers between schools and outside of the district as well. These tables have not changed since draft 2. They're just there for your information. And the last two slides are an analysis of the charter impact on Moore County schools. As we have been saying through this entire process, the data that we use is only Moore County schools data. It does not include charter school membership or private school or homeschool students. I just wanted to call your attention to the items in the addenda.
Mr. Miller, just a quick question about the ORED chart, just so that I'm clear. This is directly from ORED.
This is an update from Numerics for this year. The ORED plan only went up through 2017.
Right, okay.
We got our new data for 2018 last fall, a year ago. I do a historical analysis, I do another cohort analysis, and adjust the forecast accordingly. So that's what you're looking at here, dated March 4th, 2019.
So the 2 developments that were added are in your geocodes, but not necessarily in this chart, so.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's a separate line of data that you brought in.
That's
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
And then one of the elements we're also putting together right now is for the public to know if they may potentially be impacted on a proposed shift of schools. We are working with a consulting company, Edulog, in developing a query base, and it is our goal to have this available on our Moore County Schools webpage the week of September 9th. This would be a link where the public can come, select on the link from the home page. You'll ask them to enter their home address, and it will then tell you within the superintendent's recommended plan what elementary, middle, and high schools they could potentially be attending. So we are building this query at this moment with the assistance of Edulog, and it's our goal to roll this out the week of September 9th.
This will be linked on our homepage somewhere?
Yes, it will on
Okay.
the front page,
Thank you.
homepage.
And the new map, the recommended map, will be added to, and I'm looking kind of at Catherine Murphy over there, to the current redistricting information that's on the website.
Talk about the portal.
Yes, ma'am, and we'll have a portal that's available for public to go in and give, and leave comments, questions, and their feedback. So we'll continue that practice that we've had through the first 2 drafts. We'll have that active tomorrow, and on that page with information, we'll have maps. We'll also have this query search opportunity as soon as it's available next week.
How will you explain on the query the different years? Say somebody moves into the area and they look on there and they're going to this school now, but 2 years from now they'll be assigned to another school.
And then the query is gonna be built off of the final recommendation of the superintendent, assuming it's complete. They would have to reference the, previous page on the,
Year.
shifts by year from school to
Okay.
school.
Thanks.
To see if that's their impact year.
Dr. Arthur, would you just finish
Sure,
up by talking
absolutely.
a little bit about the community input process and maybe mention the final
Yes, sir.
timeline?
The next step in this process is for us to hold a public hearing that's scheduled at Union Pines High School on September 12th, to begin at 6 p.m. on September 12th. That is an opportunity for the public to come and share comments with the board based on this proposed plan, this recommended plan from the superintendent. We also, again, will have the online portal available for the public, for parents to leave comments and questions. We will be coming back to the board and reporting back to the board on a summary of that information on October 7th, as well as receiving feedback from you. And then the timeline would have you to potentially approve the superintendent's recommended plan on October 14th at your regular business meeting.
And is the public hearing, is that a sign-up to speak opportunity as our general comment period is during our regular business meetings?
Yes, ma'am. We would have the sign-up process out in front in the lobby area in front of the Union Pines Auditorium, and they would be able to sign up as they're coming to Union Pines High School.
Great, thank you.
And what time do you need to be there to sign up?
I believe policy has that being 15 minutes prior to the meeting. So that would have to sign up prior to 5:45, and we'd have it available by 5 p.m. Sonia, is that usually how we do that? So it would be available at 5 p.m. for folks to come and sign in.
Will we be able to record that and live stream that?
It will be, we'll have that available. It'll be live streamed, recorded, and available for folks to review afterwards as well, if they so choose.
And it's important to note that the portal will be available for those that are not in town that day to be able to provide their comments.
Yes, ma'am. It
Correct.
will be open through September 20th.
September 20th.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
they even have a little bit more time. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
good.
And there's a way for them to blow up the map too, to look.
I have to, that's my understanding.
On the portal. On the portal.
On our information site, yes, they'll be able to click on that, review maps, as well as go through the portal and leave comments or questions if they have it.
So at this point, people don't need to worry about looking back at phase 1 or phase 2. We are now in the final recommendation, and that's the only thing they need to really turn their attention to.
Yes, ma'am. Drafts 1 and 2 informed the final plan that's come out now, so this is its own plan, but those previous drafts elicited community input, reaction, and inspired the planning committee to think through what this final one would be. So we've done our best, and I'll make a comment about that in my closing remark. This is its own plan.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? With your permission, Madam Chair? Madam Chair and members of the board, I now offer some concluding thoughts about this proposed plan for the realignment of our school boundaries across Moore County. As I indicated in my introduction, we present this proposed plan with a humble sense of duty and responsibility. It is a plan designed to address important needs across our entire school district, and it has required us to propose changes that will cause some short-term disruption and inconvenience in the daily routines and traditional assumptions of multiple communities, neighborhoods, and individual families. As you can see on the closing thoughts slide, the plan will alter traditional attendance patterns for up to 16% of our elementary school students, up to 20% of our middle school students, and up to 3% of our high school students. For that reason, we refuse to market this plan as ambitious or bold. It is not something that we celebrate, since we realize that it may be perceived as a reward by some and a cost for others. Instead, we offer it as our best effort to balance local interests with the broader needs of Moore County as a whole. We have embraced this task with a deep sense of personal responsibility to all of our students, all of our families, all of our schools, and all Moore County citizens. We have worked hard to find the best possible alignment of our students among our schools in the near term and throughout the coming 8 to 10 years. We have pursued balance, consistency, equity, fairness, efficiency, and sustainability. In the end, we settled on this proposed plan as our best work, believing that it is the right thing to do. Throughout the planning process, and particularly through the community engagement phase of that process, we received feedback that has been critical and feedback that has been complimentary. All of the feedback has informed or challenged our thinking, and all of it has been considered carefully. We are grateful to everyone who has contributed their perspectives as members of the advisory committee during any of our community forums or through email, online portals, traditional mail, and otherwise. I encourage you as board members to ask yourselves if the proposed plan meets the need for comprehensive school reassignment. Did we abide by your approved process, timeline, and guiding principles? And did we achieve your desired outcomes? We now hand over the final stage of this process to your capable hands and offer our further service as you seek public comment on this plan and as you engage in your own final evaluation of its merit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Grimacy, staff, and our consultants. I'm very grateful for all of your work. I know it has not been easy. A lot of input has been received and looked at, and a lot of data has informed this process. So I appreciate all the work that you have done. Are there any final questions? I know we have a lot of thinking to do, and we'll be listening to the public.
I had a comment, it actually goes to show you that in the near future, we're gonna need another middle school. Those percentages are really high, so.
And we knew that with our facilities plan. It is
Exactly.
on the plan. It's just not high up as some of our other needs. So,
But it brings it in perspective with that data.
High school.
Yeah,
and it
in high school.
forces us to keep looking at that out into the future as well, that we cannot rest. Once these schools are constructed and this redistricting is done, we will have, always have continued work looking into the future. And this process, I think, has helped us look at how to do redistricting. So thank you. Do we need a short break again? Or
Madam Chair, staff would appreciate a 5-minute.
I was just going to say, the
because
staff,
it's sort of a shift from
It
this
is a big
to
shift.
what we've got left, if you don't
we'll
mind.
take a few minutes, yes. Board members, are we ready to proceed?
Yes.
All right, let's continue. We have more important work ahead. Mr. Barath or Dr. Grimacy?
Thank you, ma'am. I'd be happy to turn it over to Mr. Barath. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to take this opportunity to introduce you to a monthly topic that I'll be bringing to you, and that's update on the school construction projects. Lots going on, so we want to make sure everyone stays well informed of the progress at the sites. We're continuously trying to make sure we keep the planning website current with information, photographs, et cetera, about what's going on out there. But we'll take this opportunity to bring the board current on all the projects. Start off with one that was a happy day, and that's McDeeds Creek Elementary, where we had our ribbon cutting and welcoming of staff and students to their new school. So the exciting day that was out there with a school and the happy excitement from all the children that were able to participate that day. And it was sunny and hot, yes. One of the updates I want to make sure we include with the board is progress on any remaining work or work that is ongoing, as well as where we stand with our budget process in this. You'll learn more about that in the next presentation following. The McDeeds Creek still has some items to finish. They're contractor punch list items. These are items that were inspected and found by the design team or by planning department to be items that are not in compliance with the documents, whether incomplete or done incorrectly. They are scheduling to complete that by October 18th to wrap up their punch list. We are working with them on the final transition of the mechanical control systems. As you're aware, buildings are controlled by numerous small component panel boards on every imaginable piece of the mechanical system. And one of the issues we faced at this school was shortly before the opening, it was, I believe, late July, a lightning strike took out the controls on some of the units. They had to reorder them and get them in. So they've been getting everything reprogrammed out there and trying to get the system ready and turned over to us for our energy management program. So they are working on that, and if all goes well, by the end of September, or shortly by that 20th, we'll have all systems turned over to us for an energy management program. There were comments by people where they saw some of the trees and shrubberies that have burned up that have been since planted, and those will be replaced as part of their punch list in October. Obviously, we didn't want to replace anything in the summer and let them burn up again. And while the roundabout was complete at in front of the entry drive to the school on Camp Easter Road, there remains work to do with turn lanes over on Route 22 in Fairway and Niagara Carthage and Camp Easter Road, and those will be completed in January. Those properties require the acquisition of additional right-of-way and easements. There's over a dozen properties that are impacted, and with our consultants and our legal counsel, we are wrapping up that process hopefully soon. Our budget, this had multiple elements to it. We had to install a water and sewer line extension. You'll recall that goes from the project site all the way down to US 1. That project had previously been completed and has been paid 100% and within budget. The contractor for the new school, J.M. Thompson Company, they are at 92% of their paid progress out there, as we are holding on the money retainage until they complete said items out there. Good news is, with our furniture, fixtures, equipment, and technology, we're about 95%, maybe more than that done. There are just some small loose end elements that people might have overlooked throughout the process of miscellaneous items being done there. But the good news is that is coming under the budget line item that we'd previously presented for that. Other elements, media center collection, as you saw, was complete out there in the media center for the students, custodial equipment, kitchen smallwares. Those line items are now complete for that project. So as we get closer to the finishing here, we'll be able to give you a final full update on the total budgets and expenditures throughout. Any questions on this to date?
Before you go on, just in some things I saw people asking about the plantings, and you mentioned replacement of the dead trees and whatnot in October. Those were guaranteed plantings, correct? So
Yes, they
that's
are.
not an additional expense to the schools.
No, they're not.
It is something that the contractor will come in and replace.
That is correct. As well as anything else that happens within 1 year by general statute, and then we have specific items within the building system that are warranted for 5, 10, 20 plus years. Aberdeen Elementary School, project under construction. Here you can see from this aerial shot, the entry to the building, as we've seen in the past, is on the left side there. You can see they're starting to get dried in out there with the roofing system beginning to be installed for the metal decking. That gets the interiors kind of dry. And you can see some of the bricks starting to come up around where the cafeteria and the gym is over there on the right side. You can see the outline of the 3 classroom wings that go out the back with the roof trusses there. This is a different angle shot, so you can see the timbers that are already up in place over those classroom wings at the school there, and you can see how they're starting to dry in on the left side, the roofing, and they have the brick up and around that portion of it. You can see off in the distance the entry road that comes in from US 5, winding between the trees up there. And in the foreground, you can see some straight line trenching, which is the beginning of the tie-in system for the geothermal system out there. The scaffolding, the masonry going in, the insulation on the walls going up in there. Inside, down the classroom wings, you can see the timber trusses are in. They're beginning their communication ladder rack down the middle and ductwork coming down the hallways. Looking a little cleaner in there than you were last time when you remember when you were out there. This is down the main entry hallway that goes from the main entry down past the media center, the gym, and the cafeteria, and all the classroom wings. You can see the clear story openings up high that let light diffuse down in there between them. Here you're looking at the gymnasium area with its truss timbers and then the ductwork running between the webbing up high in there, and then the windows facing out to the side. And then you have the cafeteria here, and you can see with the decking up, the ductwork, the timbers, as well as they begin getting their framing up for the bulkheads and soffits around it. Exciting things going on out there. The contract completion date is January 24th of 2020. The contractor schedule has slipped by 28 days. This triggers a requirement where they are losing their float time out there. And float time is where they have an allowance between sequencing of work stages along the way that they can accelerate and pick up advanced work on things. So it's eating that up on there, and they are required contractually to submit a recovery schedule, which they're in the process of developing for us to demonstrate how they're going to get back on schedule out there. Currently, 60% of the construction timeline has passed out there. They are in the budget process, paid for 50% progress again, because they're not quite along the 60% stage at this point. Upon the recovery and successful getting to that, you'd see those 2 numbers line up a little closer. The off-site sewer that was installed, and that was a project that was done in conjunction with the landowner of the adjacent property you've heard referred to as the Martin property in our previous presentation, and with the town of Aberdeen, where we ran it to a different sewer service station than what was originally anticipated on Route 5, and that project is complete. We have not on this project used any contingency for the project that's been identified in the budget, nor have we used any of the inflation funds that have been identified as remaining from the original award of contract. We did use some contingency at the beginning to award contract, and we used the prorated amount of inflation to the award of contract, but since then, none of the remaining established contingency or inflation funds have been utilized on this project.
A quick question about the completion date that's here. How does that relate to having a certificate of occupancy? Is it relatable? Does it happen afterwards?
The
or
substantial completion and certificate of occupancy is January 24th.
Okay, so I know we had talked about using the building in the spring for events, for kindergarten registration, to start to bring the families and the community in. So right now, we're still on track to do that, sounds like?
We are, like I said, they are 28 days out, so that pushes it to about February 23rd out there right now is where they are. And we're waiting them to demonstrate their acceleration schedule to get back to this date.
So some events will be able to be held, but
Absolutely.
as we get closer, we'll be able to schedule those. Thank you.
And we'll continue monitoring and updating the board on their progress and ability to recover those days.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to, just going through this with McDeeds Creek, it's really exciting when you can start to bring the community through and they can see what the school's going to look like in a more real fashion. So thank you.
Madam
there's-
Chairman, members of the board, I'll note that I just told a cafeteria full of fourth grade Aberdeen students that Mr. Barath was going to have their school ready for them by March. And if he doesn't, then he has them to answer to.
And that's the other thing.
Tough customers, John.
They are, the toughest.
Very tough.
And that also provides opportunity for both schools, because again, as you know, we're taking two schools, a primary and elementary, and bringing them together as one. And this provides opportunity for them to come out here for certain events as two schools into one after their certificate of occupancy. Begin to get familiar, get excited, know the school, know where they're going to be the following year, and even some activities can be conducted with those students out there at that school during that time. Southern Pines, there we go, elementary school. A lot of earthwork has gone on out there to create that sloping site buildable by tiers. One of the early steps that had to be done out there was the construction of some retaining walls. The building does act as a retaining wall, as you'll recall. From the front, from Carlisle Street Extension, when you come to the school, you're actually at the upper level because the site slopes away. So when you enter on that Carlisle Street side, you're on an upper level, and then you go down to the ground level out the back. And so that building acts as something of a retaining wall. And so that's what you see in this photo here is they're building, first casting the retaining wall part of the building so they can continue around that. You see some of the foundations. This is at the back lower end by the bus parking lot side. So you can see they're already getting their underground plumbing in, footings and foundations coming up through there, and trenching for power and electrical. This gives you a little more of a panoramic feel of what it is out there for the progress of what they're doing. Again, more of that lower level. Once they get the lower level retaining walls up and they backfill against that, they'll then be able to start on that upper level by Carlisle. Again, just some more panoramic. You can see the dirt on the left. That's where the upper level by Carlisle will be constructed, but they have dirt stockpiled there to backfill against that retaining wall. So once that's done, they'll be able to move up there. The construction completion date is September 17th of 2020. The contractor is currently on schedule, meeting all the critical path milestones. Matter of fact, right now on quite a few of those, they are running ahead of those schedules, which helps them as well as everyone else, especially if they encounter any inclement weather along the way. Gain days now will help later. Their 11% of the construction timeline has passed at this time. As far as the budget goes, the early site grading package is done. That's a process that happened back in the early spring to clear the site, prep it, and rough grade it. Monteith Construction, who's the current contractor out there, they're at 10% paid on progress, so they're matching up with their pace of construction there. And again, outside, the original awarded contract required the prorated amount of the inflation to be applied to it, as well as some of the contingency. But since those funds have been distributed, none of the remaining inflation escalation nor any of the contingency have been allocated to this project at this time. So that one's running well on schedule at this point, and we'll continue.
Mr. Barath, let's talk a little bit about the completion date of September 17th, 2020, and elaborate a little bit on how that has changed here in the last few months and what steps are being taken. How does that adjust the move-in schedule?
And what that is that the original schedule had the school anticipated to be completed near the end of July of 2020. And we thought we had allocated enough time through the permitting process for this project to go through and to be to the point where they received authorization to construct from all authorities having jurisdiction. As it turns out, that took longer and impacted the date of when the contractor could start, which meant it impacted when they could finish. We worked with them on looking at accelerating the schedule and compressing the time. But with a shortage of tradespeople in the workplace right now, they said it's not going to be possible. They would not get enough tradespeople out there to pick up any acceleration of time. And so that's let the schedule for their work slip on when they started, moved past that date to have that end of July and moved it into September of 17. So just like at the Aberdeen school, we're going to have a school that's going to be finished during a school year in session. And so it becomes same process, available for community use. Again, we have 2 separate schools, a primary and elementary. They'll have opportunities to come to the school and do the same activities, functions we were just talking about with Aberdeen. And it sets up an opportunity for a move-in at the Christmas break. Currently, the schedule for the innovative school year calendar has a Christmas break as a break between grading periods. Doing a move-in at that time is seamless from that point because the school would have all new furniture. We're not moving furniture out of existing schools. Allow staff to begin to move and identify elements to go into their classrooms and go set them up ahead of that time. It also lets staff prepare everything for when they leave for the Christmas break, for other contractors to come in and take and set up into their classrooms for when they return in January. So we have the opportunity to still get occupancy of the building in January of 2021 for students to be attending that school.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes, please.
You know, at first I was disappointed that we would not be able to open the school on time for the 2021 school year. But as I got to thinking about it, and in a conversation I had with Ms. Wagner recently, all along that completion date at the end of July also bothered me.
Yeah.
I was always worried about that completion date. It was so close to the beginning of the school year. And even with the splash pad up on the hill, it was 2.5 months behind the completion date. And McDeeds Creek was supposed to be done mid-July, and it was up until right the day that teachers were coming back, that we got the day before the teachers came back, we got the certificate of occupancy. This removes all doubt. It removes all concern about where we're going to be on the first days of school. So our teachers will be able to focus on just getting ready for the school year and not be worried about this last-minute rushed move into a new school. And is it going to be ready? Is it not going to be ready? It's not going to be ready. But it's going to be ready. Right now, the completion date is September, but a couple of hurricanes, who knows? You know, we could be into October.
Right.
But under no circumstances do we have any fear that it's going to threaten the Christmas break. And so what'll end up happening, I anticipate, as I envision it, there's going to be at least a month and a half to 2 months where our children and teachers and parents will be able to visit the new site, become familiar with it the way that the McDeeds Creek community was able to, the way the Aberdeen community is going to be able to. They'll be able to warm up to it. As John pointed out, all new furniture, fixtures, and equipment, so there won't have to be a major move of equipment like we saw with the temporary Pinehurst School, you know, where it's all the old stuff. And teachers will actually have some time. Dr. Locklear and I and Ms. Wagner have talked about some plans where we'll arrange ways for teachers to be afforded opportunities to start moving some of their stuff in ahead of time so it doesn't all happen over the holidays. And we just think this will be a much more orderly commissioning, if you will, of this new school and a great way to start January. You know, usually you come back from the Christmas holidays and it's kind of blah, you know, for a couple months until, you know, it starts warming up. But this will be a great opportunity as we get into January of 2021 to start the year for our young Southern Pines students. We will have some budgetary implications. We need to think through some of the interim positions that we have and these consolidated positions. We don't have that all thought out. We don't know exactly how we're going to do that, but we'll have to look at the budgetary implications of that and work with the county commissioners, and I'm sure they'll be interested in trying to put together a plan that'll enable us to have those extra positions that we're going to need to into 2021. It is some significant expense, but it's also not one that we can't come up with some sort of a plan for. So, Madam Chair, you were going to perhaps offer some comments or questions, but I wanted to make sure that you all knew that we had already given some thought. We're already working with Ms. Wagner. Knowing about this presentation, we gave her permission to have a joint meeting of the primary and elementary school faculties today to kind of brief them on the presentation and assure them that you know, we'll be planning well ahead on this and trying to keep any discomfort at a minimum. Madam Chair.
And I appreciate you pointing out some of the benefits of it happening this way and rolling out this way, particularly with where we were this summer with opening 3 schools that were in different places of construction or new opening. In terms of redistricting, if I believe I saw correctly on the last presentation that the Southern Pines redistricting impact would move to the 22 year, is that right?
That is correct.
The following year. Am I getting that year right?
Yes, ma'am. And you know, it's more appropriate, I think that it's fortuitous for the redistricting plan. We were actually glad that there wasn't any guess. This is an area where the second guessing being taken off the table really helps. Originally, we were looking at perhaps making the moves with Southern Pines in 2021, but that would have been very risky because we wouldn't have known if it was going to be ready or not. So by it not being available, we just automatically assumed that the moves involving Southern Pines would have to align with Pinehurst, which makes perfectly good sense. So we just think that what seemed like misfortune numerous weeks ago, I think has worked out the same way the location of McDeeds Creek has worked out for us. And
Although we might go ahead and mention that proactive parents could go ahead and move their child at the start of that year, knowing that they would get to be involved in that January move into the new school.
yes, ma'am.
And right from the beginning would be a part of it.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any other questions or comments about this particular change?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brath, continue.
Thank you. Northmore High School additions and renovation. From this aerial shot, you can see in the foreground to the left is where the admin building is. To the right, the back parking lot for students, and you can see the ball fields in the distance. Adjacent to the parking lot, that is where the gym and the auditorium are, to give you reference. That cleared area of Northmore Clay is where the modular units used to sit, and they've begun all their grading and utility relocations in that area to prep it for building foundations. Coming around the building, again, just another aerial just from another direction there. I want to point out in this opportunity, in this photo, there is something that we encountered out there. And in the foreground, in the front, I'd point with a laser, but I don't have that ability on the screen. We discovered when they dug and did their grading work there and started getting ready for building pad and foundations, buried debris. Apparently when they cleared the area for the mobile units to be put in place, they just buried everything over here on the site for that area. So they have begun excavating that out. We're not sure what we're getting into, especially when we're on a site that's already has development on it, existing schools. And so in the contract documents, we did provide allowances for any soil areas and things that have to be removed and restored with clean new. So right now, the engineers are going through assessing the quantities to see if they fall within the allocation amounts within the contract. So we don't have that information back yet. I'll be able to update the board on that at next month's presentation with it, but it is something that we are monitoring there that could potentially have an impact, but we do not know at this time.
It also reminds us that that's an issue that could await us at the Pinehurst Elementary site. And,
Correct.
Even though that's flat and it seems like a very manageable site, as we go into it, we do have some concerns about that, and John, I know you'll mention that later.
So they're continuing to restore that area and get it all set coming around. The gymnasium area, they've already gone inside, cleared it all out. If you were able to stick your head in there and you're out there for the kickoff and see everything, it's a nice big empty space with actually mini excavators.
For those that
roaming
don't know,
around.
that's the locker room area. The gym is fine.
Yeah, the gym's fine, I'm sorry. The gym locker room.
Have some very nervous teenagers up there if you tell them we've gutted their gym.
It's a low ceiling gym. So, and they, getting all the utilities and everything trenched in and foundations where needed for the new construction to commence inside the building there. So they're actively continuing within. That's kind of nice because it's indoor protected. No matter what happens, rain or anything, they can continue to work inside there. The contract for completion date is August 9th of 2020 out there. Contractor is on schedule and is so far meeting all the critical path items that have been identified in the contract. About 12% of the timeline has passed, Monteith Construction is also the contractor on this one. They're on the Southern Pines one. And their current pay to date is 10% of the project cost or agreement for them. So you can see again how those two numbers are close. You'll never see their paid amount exceed the timeline or anything by that measure. The unsuitable soils, again, we'll bring an update to the board next month once we get our final assessment and any impact it has to the budget on this project. But to date, outside of anything that was used to award the contract, again, we have not allocated any inflation remaining or contingency remaining for any additional costs at this time.
Can you talk a little bit about our scheduled ribbon cut, or not ribbon cutting, groundbreaking?
Groundbreaking.
Yes.
Yes, we had originally scheduled the groundbreaking to be this Thursday at 2 o'clock, and as everyone's aware from the news, is that Dorian is going to bring some rain into the area with some risk of maybe some gusting and higher speed winds. And so we felt it prudent to go ahead and postpone it from that date of Thursday. We are working with the school and we'll be working with the board on identifying a new date to conduct the groundbreaking out there. So at this point, we're postponing it from this Thursday to an undetermined date at this time, which we'll be working through Sonia and the board to put a date and time together.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from board members?
Very good, John. Thank you, sir.
This is a really helpful report, so
It
thank you.
is.
We look
Get
forward
this every
to
month. We'll be
seeing
bringing
it monthly.
updates.
With your permission, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
We'll let Mr. Barath stay right where he's at because he offers the first two pending action items. Mr. Barath.
Thank you, Dr. Grimsey. As board is aware from previous presentation of the bids that were open for the new Pinehurst Elementary School last August, when we spoke about it, we had a better turnout than we feared at the time for bidders on that project. The bids were within 5.3% of one another, with the lowest apparent responsible bidder being Thomas Construction Group out of Wilmington, with their bid of $31,750,000. Excuse me. Similar to the formats presented previously on the award of contracts for the projects, we always start with the budget sheet. And so in the budget sheet, we always identify the funding that had been previously indicated for construction of the project. Within that sheet, we look at the certain specific line items within it, and these are the elements dealing with where it's the new building, site modifications, demolition, and the maintenance building. Those are the elements that we are looking at that set the anticipated construction budget at the time of bid. We also take a look at the inflation amount and a prorated amount of that that's attributable to these four line items identified. When you put them all together, the anticipated budget on bid day was $28.87 million. Again, the bids received by the four bidders, the apparent low was $31,750,000. So there is a difference there. When we take a look at the bid, including any alternates, $0. Any alternates that don't come at a cost. We didn't have any deduct alternates to consider in this one. There's a difference between the budget and the bid amount of an over of $2,879,129. And so the question comes, so how do we begin to evaluate the project and the bid and try to see how we can bring this down into an award amount that will have the funding available to pay it. Similar to what we did with the other projects, we started off with the design team, the engineers, the contractors, and their subcontractors, and went through a value engineering exercise. This is a different architect than we had on the previous ones and different engineers than on the previous projects, so we have some different perspectives. This is also a different contractor. They have not built any of the construction projects here in Moore County, and so we had fresh eyes looking at the project through and through. There are some items that we identified that are features not previously included in the design of Aberdeen Elementary and Southern Pines Elementary Schools. And so those items totaled just over $400,000, and we removed those from the project. So once those were removed, we took a look at what was remaining in the project for opportunities. Again, with the focus on not compromising the sustainability and the operation of the facility. Again, primary purpose of instruction and learning, also sustainability to last and not be compromised, and operating efficiencies. So we made sure to make sure that we did not violate any of those, as we did not do those on any other projects. Working with the engineers and the contractors, looked at revising our design of the asphalt paving areas. And by implementing those changes, we're about $132,000. Typically, where we have downspouts in schools, where they come in contact at the ground, we put them in cast iron so they do not get damaged by weed eaters, by equipment or anything moving along the building, and then they rupture and cause erosion on the grade level. In this case, what we found was that all the downspouts are within landscaped areas, so they would have minimal exposure to risk, so we could change those out to PVC and save money. Stair railings and guardrails had a perforated plate style to them and going to a steel square post picket system to save funding. The bus canopy that comes out, if you recall, from the classroom building to the media center, there's a outdoor courtyard and the canopy comes out in that area. And just to shorten it by 2 bays from going all the way out near at the bus lot to come back, that's consistent with the other projects, and that reduces the funds. Precast terrazzo, again, we're using terrazzo on the flooring in the building because it's no wax, which reduces our FTE demands on the school through the life of it, as well as the cost of materials. And that saves money, and by eliminating the precast on the stairs and going with a no wax vinyl finish on the stairs, we can save almost $50,000. That's a duplicate up there, that's my fault. Carried that point over at the top. The architect had proposed putting acoustic panels in the corridors. We don't have that at the other schools, so we removed those at $58,000. The elevator was designed to be a traction elevator, changing it to a different type, saved $31,000, which is consistent with Southern Pines Elementary. Again, converting some second floor piping from cast iron to PVC at locations not above instructional areas saves money. What we do in wrapping our mechanical insulation on components and going from one technique to another technique can save money, but yet not compromise the efficiency of them. Saving, and as well as the lighting schedule. The subcontractor worked with their supply vendor on alternate lighting solutions for some of the fixtures in the building, and that saved $67,000. All in all, it's a value engineering reduction of $801,000 to the project. So again, we had just over $2.8 million in a deficit in the amount identified versus the bid amount. $801,000 to bring that down. If we were to assign all of the contingency identified, which is $945,000, as well as the balance on the inflation amount of $194,000, that closes the gap to $938,000 that is short on the project. Certainly.
Is that just the interior lighting? Is there
That
any
is all interior lighting.
Is there any exterior lighting?
There are some wall packs on the building, yes, at exits.
Any opportunities there?
They didn't feel there was any on the wall packs with the units that were specified.
John, with your correction, was the 49,000 calculated twice?
No, it
Maybe?
wasn't. That was a carryover in my summary when I
Okay,
set the sheet up and
okay.
had entered that.
And you and Ms. Potter will make sure that that's corrected on the,
We'll correct that on there
okay, thank you.
for the final. Okay. So again, we can't look at this in isolation with this project, because it is a three-project funding. $103 million for Aberdeen, Southern Pines, and Pinehurst Elementary. You'll recall that with the Southern Pines project, we had faced a tough situation there with an escalation on difficulty of construction on the site, an escalation of $2.68 million. With this, Pinehurst Elementary School, $938,000, that brings the total $103 million budget to a $3.6 million potential deficit, okay? Now, we
That's
have
against 103 million, just to
against the
make sure that's
103
clear,
million,
right?
Staying within those boundaries right now. With the Aberdeen and the Southern Pines projects, there is still funding, as I reported previously, that are remaining untouched. The contingencies and the escalation amounts in those. On those projects, it's just over $1.4 million that's identified at this time. We cannot use any funding savings from McDeeds Creek to this. That is a direct finance structure with a bank through the county, and funds cannot be used for other projects out of that finance structure. It's the same thing for Northmore. If there's any money remaining on Northmore, it cannot be used for these projects. But anything between Aberdeen, Southern Pines, and Pinehurst can be used as long as it's within that $103 million.
Before you leave that, can you look at what we've saved from, or what we haven't used from McDeeds Creek as a barometer of what we may be able to end each of these other projects with, even though they're very different?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's a great lead into the very next item.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for that. So between the three projects and the fourth being McDeeds Creek, they're the same schools, an 800 core capacity school. Same number of furniture, fixtures, equipment, and technology items in each one. So what we have at McDeeds Creek, we know the quantities, we know the amounts, it's repeated at the other schools. The difference being at McDeeds Creek, they needed a whole media center collection because it's a new school to our system. The other schools don't need that. They're taking their existing collections and bringing them together at the one school, or from the existing Pinehurst to the new Pinehurst. So currently, through our, what we know at McDeeds Creek, we are very confident that we will have at least $200,000 remaining in the furniture, fixtures, equipment, and technology category. It could be more. Again, we're wrapping up those last acquisitions that need to happen on miscellaneous items, and as soon as that's done, we'll have a known number. We've already spoken with vendors from the furniture industries about any cost impacts coming up and things like that, so we can plan accordingly and not risk overcommitting. But it looks very good that we are very confident that on the conservative side, we can use $200,000 from each of the three projects, which totals $600,000 in potential savings right there. So that brings the revised difference on the budget down to $1.5 million. Now, there is some inherent risk in this, and Dr. Grimsey had mentioned that a moment ago. As buildings come up, we talked about this at McDeeds Creek. Once you're dried in and your site utilities are in place, your dependence on contingency reduces dramatically, because all of your unknowns are resolved by that point. You may have some miscellaneous things along the way, but most of them are going to be, so that drops, and the risk on the contingencies goes away to a certain point on those. Pinehurst Elementary School site, I will say it's going to be maybe a mystery out there until we get to the utilities and foundations, because we know there used to be existing structures out on those grounds that are no longer there. How they tore them down and filled in where they were, we do not know until we get into it. We did geotechnical borings on the site, but unless we are willing to do a boring every square foot across the site, you're just not going to know every condition possible. That good news is that's early in the process where it'd be identifiable. And so we'll know more within the first few months of construction of any risk to elements like that, just like at Northmore, early in the construction identifiable. So still, even if all goes well, about $1.5 million. So that's still an area that needs to be resolved. Where does that money come from? Dr. Grimacy and I worked at length on this, many discussions and looking at possible scenarios. Currently, the unappropriated report on the North Carolina lottery for Moore County has $1.7 million in it. We have purposely been hedging this money against unknown situations that we are facing with our schools and our projects, and based upon county financing of the request that Dr. Grimacy presented to the commissioners previously. If we were to go ahead and set 100% of that amount aside for the purpose of a hedge against the overage, that would be to the good $137,000. Not much. If we run into anything unforeseen at Pinehurst, you can see that number go very quickly. So we'd feel better if we were able to get near $500,000 to the good and then begin to assess monthly through the projects on that dependence and see if we could reduce it. So if we take a look at our unappropriated remaining capital fund at Moore County Schools, it's approximately $400,000. And again, identify that as a hedge at the moment. That brings a total to just over $500,000 to cover any of the costs on the projects. What this would look like, you'll be familiar with this if you squint, presented at your retreat in January, where we talked about the projects that are needed to be done at our schools with lottery funding and with capital funds. These two slides break it out into one for lottery needs and the other one for capital, where the funding sources were. Both of them have the same summaries. If we go ahead and take these funds and secure them and hold them, that further defers the projects that need to get done. We have continuously found this to be a cycle that, as we are trying to get to a point of a sustainable cycle for our schools, we just keep moving that ball further and further year to year down. Items become more critical and higher at risk of failures if we do not address them in a timely manner. And this will enable us also that, as I mentioned, as the construction projects progress and are completed, we reassess where we are with that risk of putting the $1.7 million as a hedge and the $400,000 in our capital as a hedge, and begin to possibly reduce those amounts and free up some funds to begin doing some of these critical items through here. The arrow on the bottom, you won't be able to read it there. During your retreat, you'll remember we introduced you to a dire need in the district. This is our technology infrastructure. This is what enables the system at Moore County Schools to operate. Everything from the instruction in the classroom to meeting payroll. Because at the time this is prepared, we had not received the funding requested from the county commissioners of, I got the exact amount, $745,000. We had to identify where could we get this money from, because there is a requirement that we must implement it to maximize savings that we get through E-rate funding on the projects. And so I had identified $500,000 from the lottery and $245,000 from our capital fund to pay for the $745,000 need. And I'm trying to stress the word need, because it's as if suddenly you walk in a room, then it's dark, and you turn on the switch and the lights don't come on. That is our system. That is our infrastructure. The risk of a failure means you get on your computer and you can't do anything. You can't connect to the courses. You can't connect to instructional items. You can't connect with payroll. You can't connect with buildings. This is important for the district, and so we would want to find a creative way still here to build a fund that can pay for this in a timely manner and try to work with the county on funding opportunities.
Quick question, John. Would that infrastructure also be part of the phone system, or is that a separate system?
The VoIP does carry over
With the-
backbone of the
Okay,
system.
okay. And what about the security cameras for the buses? Then that would eliminate those at this time?
No, those are recorded locally
Okay, okay,
on the bus, and then they're on a memory chip that's then removed.
thank you.
What other choice do we have if we don't want to use our lottery funds? Thought I'd throw that out there.
I have not found any other available funds at this time. The option is that if we do not build a system in place as a funding opportunity, as a hedge against these, to save additional funds means you need to compromise now at Pinehurst instructional spaces, sustainability, operational efficiencies of the building.
So it's either compromising Pinehurst or compromising all the other schools that need help, because we don't have the funds for it.
If you go back to that, those couple of pages where you identified a few, the value engineering options, are those items that we have done at other schools as well?
Some of them we have not. We are going back where we can to see if there's any opportunities for them. Aberdeen's a single-story building, so anything regarding a second story and all those measures, obviously not. But at Southern Pines, if there's any opportunities that we can incorporate any of these, we will be. We've already incorporated some of the paving and other design features like those at the other schools.
So as we've gone along, we have implemented savings where we can. So each building is
More economical than.
more economical. I was looking for the right word. Thank you.
It may be helpful for the board to get a summary. Once this is, now that Pinehurst has gone through the value engineering process, it might be helpful, instructive for the public and the board to see how there's been this cascading effect of value engineering from one project to the next. Just if, for no other reason, just to give the public confidence that we haven't cheapened the last two schools that happen to be in the queue, if you will. That McDeeds Creek is the one before 3 levels of value engineering. So there may be some people that ask a reasonable question as to whether or not that 3 tiers of value engineering may leave us with a Southern Pines and a Pinehurst school that have somehow been deprived of something that McDeeds Creek and Aberdeen might have gotten. Very important. I think our community has a high expectation for equity among our schools, and I think we have an obligation that if that's not the case, that we fully disclose that.
That's very much, and that's why you see these items, again, we had those 3 identified areas not to violate. And also, most of these items are not elements that you will be exposed to when you walk in from one school to the next. They're in this, behind the systems.
And with the destruction of the school, Pinehurst School, those dollars are allocated in a different type fund?
The demolition cost?
Yes.
The demolition is part of the construction, so that's
Okay.
part of the bid for the
Okay.
31.7.
So all of that is all inclusive?
It's already
Okay.
in there.
Okay.
You know, it's scary looking at the list from the previous one, the things that need to be done, the scope of work at all these schools, knowing that this is just the first page
First
of
page.
things that need to be done this coming year, and knowing that we're going to, with the expression, kick the can farther on down the road, and put these things off, and knowing there's even bigger things ahead, in the next few years that need to be done. I did want to ask that there's 3 things on here that pertain to Northmore. Can they possibly be incorporated with the construction process that is underway at Northmore?
If there are any funds remaining, we can work with the county on that specific school site project for which the financing was for.
You know, it's just a drop in the bucket, it's about 106,000 in the scheme of things, but still, if it would help us a little bit because those funds are available, it would make sense.
If there's any available, yes.
Yeah.
You have to remember, we had a deficit at Northmore as well, and we went through this same process. It wasn't quite on the same scale as what we're dealing with all the projects. And as Mr. Weaver will find out as he continues to go through his drinking from the fire hydrant, so to speak, we are receiving, John, about 50% of lottery funds for construction that we received in, was it 2012?
Yes, 2011, 12, I believe that's right.
About 11 and 12.
$1.6 million back then.
So, money was taken, lottery funds were taken out of construction and used for other operational needs on the part of the state. And so, we actually have less money for capital needs now than we did back in 2011 and 12. Do you have a recommendation, Mr.
I do,
Brewer?
sir. And so,
Ultimately, this comes down to us deciding if we want to award the contract. We just had to show the board how we would pay for this recommendation.
And so the recommendation made to the superintendent is to approve the construction agreement for the school with Thomas Construction Group in the amount of $30,948,870, including all items noted in the value engineering. The second part of this recommendation is also to approve the establishment of a hedge, or another term, fund against the total project cost for Aberdeen, Southern Pines, and Pinehurst schools, utilizing the $1,717,828 of current unappropriated lottery funding and $400,000 of the current unappropriated Moore County Schools capital fund. Again, this amount will be revisited by staff and Andrew Cox and Superintendent Grimacy as projects progress, to recommend to the board reducing that amount at the time if so deemed necessary. And I'm available with any additional questions you may have.
No, we've asked questions already. Are there any others?
Oh, just to make sure I understand, if by chance in Southern Pines and Aberdeen we have any leftover money, we could feasibly move that over to Pinehurst Elementary.
Correct.
Okay, within those three schools.
Correct.
Okay,
And
we'll
that's
keep our
because
fingers
those are the-
crossed that we don't have any major catastrophes.
Right.
Any other questions?
I mean, I'm just gonna be honest, I don't like it. I don't think we should use our lottery funds, but there's really no other solution to that.
We're
So-
going to clarify something for you, Ms. Caldwell. I share your concern. The plan that Mr. Barath has laid out assumes that we're going to need that last 1.5 million. As the projects proceed, there's a chance we might not. And so as we get closer, and one of the benefits of these monthly reports on the timelines and budgets for each of these projects, you as a board will be kept up to date on this information every month, and you'll be able to see how that unfolds. If we, in a worst-case scenario, we need that, or maybe even more, that's where these projects are not done. They are delayed, though. We do have to delay them. In the absence of any other help from any other source, if it's left in our hands, our only option is to not proceed with construction of the new Pinehurst Elementary School. I've struggled with this, but, there really isn't an option. We need to proceed. Building that school will never be as cost-effective as it is now. We'll never get a better price than what we're going to get now. Obviously, our children need it. Our communities need it. And we, obviously, now that the children are in the temporary school, I think that does put us in a situation where we won't even entertain the possibility of not doing it. So absent any help from any other source, this is the only way that we can show the public that we have a balanced budget. And so as we proceed, John and I have had conversation as Aberdeen gets finished and we know that we've rolled the money over, we may not need to hold back the amount that John has here, and we'll be reporting to you about that. We'll release some money and we can start working on some of those projects. Keeping in mind that list that John showed here in the PowerPoint was the list of projects that we were supposed to get done last year?
This year.
This year. It would have been in this year. Had it been fully funded,
Right.
all of those projects would be underway this year. Never been fully funded, so we're left to keep trying to find ways to, squirrel away enough every year to do as many of those projects as we can, knowing that more and more of them are getting beyond our reach the longer we go. So I do want to tell you all that you'll be able to monitor how we manage these funds, and if we don't need to hold back that amount, we'll start releasing that with each project that gets completed.
And it sounds like once the demolition of Pinehurst is done, that's also a big That's the end of the big risk. There might be other small risks, but that's the demolition
I would
cost.
offer the demolition, but the, as John said, once we have the utilities in.
That piece,
And the
yes.
foundation is set, that it's then that John indicated, that you really then at that point have a good command, a better command on your projected cost.
Very helpful, thank you.
I have a comment I'd like to make about this. I would like to see us present the commissioners with what's critical for the next 12 months. Show them, let them know what we're going to have to do with Pinehurst Elementary, and ask them how they suggest that we pay for this. And I would mention to them also, if their budget income comes in more than they had anticipated, since their budget is based on what they anticipated as income, that they earmark anything additional funding they received that we use on these projects that need to be done now.
We can talk about that. I think the most important thing at this point is getting the Pinehurst Elementary contract signed and started so that we can start the construction piece.
Yeah, that won't hold up that.
Yeah.
They need to know that we're going to need help, and they're going to have to do something.
And we'll look forward to the board's further consideration at your meeting next week.
Great, thank you. Anything else? I believe you have one more item, Mr. Barath. Is that
Please
true?
do, Mr. Barath.
Thank you. Yes, let's talk about generating some revenue. So with the demolition of Pinehurst Elementary School, there are some items in there that have had expression by individuals in the public to acquire. So they have approached Principal Ciccone, they have reached out to operations and asked about specific parts. The operations department, maintenance, child nutrition have gone through the school to identify all elements that they wish to salvage, to repurpose at other schools, to have as additional stock should other systems, other schools fail, and items such as that. And so that process will be complete at the end of this week. So the remaining items at the school that have been identified as desirable by people willing to engage in an auction for are the approximately 400 auditorium seats, the wood seats in the auditorium that you've seen out there, the curtains in the auditorium, the walk-in cooler in the back of the cafeteria, and the walk-in freezer, and the 3-compartment stainless steel sink in the kitchen. These are the elements and items that have been identified by staff and speaking with the school and with interested parties in the public, and with the school board's approval to conduct a public auction on Saturday, September 21st at 10 a.m. at the Pinehurst Elementary School at 100 Dundee Road. Attached to the executive summary is a resolution in order for sale of the personal property at the school. And I'm available to respond to any questions or comments you may have.
I had a question about the resolution. It said the purchase price shall be paid at the time of the sale by cash, so there's no checks, no credit cards, so it's
Cash only transfer.
cash only. Okay.
And funds
We have
received,
spoken. I'm
funds received that day will be well, in what accounts? I mean, what will that funding be available for?
Oh, and that funding will go, I believe it goes into the capital funding, is that correct, Andrew? Yes. Into the capital funding account.
And if there are any additional items that are identified that could be put on this list, when will we or the public be notified of that?
If there's any additional items between now and next week, the board takes action, we can amend the list for it at that time, once a resolution is passed. Legal counsel said they encourage us not to put a catch-all in anything determined by the superintendent or designee. They said that's not going to be specific enough to itemize things for an auction. So they prefer something more of a specific reference to it. And so if anybody in the public knows of anything in the building that is additional that they feel purposeful about.
So
they
any
can reach out.
sentimental value,
They can reach out.
they need to reach out to you
Correct,
and ask you to put it on this list.
for the board to consider
Okay.
And that has to be done before the board takes action next week?
before they take action next Monday.
Am I to assume that there's been an exhaustive research to make sure equipment's not needed anywhere else?
It has. The seats are not needed in any of our schools out there. They are different manufactured than the ones that we have at the other ones. The curtains do have some dry rot to them, in them. The walk-in coolers, freezers, child nutrition has no need for them or parts of them. So everything has been looked at by staff to confirm that they are true surplus.
Thank you.
John, do we have any other surplus items? I know occasionally there's like different things like that we could add to this list.
We typically don't do that. Our other surplus items are conducted on
Through the
a
state?
daily basis through GovDeals website, where the surplus items under a certain cost limit are put on there, and then every year we provide a report to the board.
Was there any mention about the bricks that have people's names on them and the dates?
The bricks you're referring to are when you enter the main office area, and they're off to the side right there. Those are being cut out and salvaged for adding into the construction of the new school.
Okay, that's great.
Will there be an auction company that we'll have to pay a percentage to do this?
No, you can offer that to me, but I will be conducting the,
You
I'll
wish.
be conducting the auction
Okay.
out there at the site. And all this has been reviewed and approved by legal counsel.
Okay. Are you a licensed auctioneer?
No, but I want to hear it.
But it's been approved by legal
But I
counsel.
stayed at a Holiday Inn.
Yes, you did, and it's approved by legal counsel.
It's approved by legal
Okay.
counsel that I can conduct it.
Board members, any more questions for Mr. Barath? I think he's about done.
Yes, thank you.
John, thank you. Very well done.
Thank you.
Shall we proceed, Madam Chair? What is the board's wish at this point?
We just have a couple of more items. Can we make it to the end? Okay,
Yes,
all right,
ma'am.
let's
And
go.
I would suggest that the heavy lifting is done. We'll invite Dr. Seth Powers forward with a proposal that is actually an annual process, if I'm correct.
Do my best to be brief. I know it's been a long meeting. So, seeking the board's endorsement to seek community feedback related to 3 student surveys that we would like to give over the course of the school year, as Dr. Grimacy said. These 3 surveys are surveys that we began to administer last year, or have administered in the past, but now would like to continue to administer annually to our students. So I'll go through quickly, give you a brief reminder of what these 3 surveys are and what our plan would be for administering. So the first survey is our social emotional learning survey. Just as a reminder, these surveys are research-based, developed by Panorama Education, which is the survey platform that we began using last year. Allows us to utilize it throughout the county, gives us great data back, and it also, the nice thing about this is they have developed these surveys over the years. They are research-based, so we know that the data that we get back is something that's reliable and consistent. So, and just as a reminder, when we talk about social emotional learning, we're talking about the mindset, skills, attitudes, and feelings that help students to succeed in life, in their careers, in school. So it's important that we measure these things, and some of those things include such things as grit. How well does a student persevere in the face of adversity? Growth mindset, setting goals. How well are students able to set and attain goals, and how can we help them when we have students who maybe don't do so well in some of those areas? So the social emotional learning survey would be given to both elementary and secondary students, 36 elementary questions and 40 secondary questions. All of these come from the Panorama Education Question Bank, and were selected to reflect the specific needs of our school district. So that's where the questions come from. Question categories include both SEL skills and competencies. Again, that includes such things as grit, growth mindset, and social awareness. But we also survey our students on supports and environment, and those categories include things that are very important right now, such as school safety, sense of belonging, teacher-student relationships, and engagement. A little background on social emotional learning. So how would we plan to administer this survey? Our delivery window will be sometime late October to early November. We'll be soliciting feedback from our principals tomorrow as a part of our leadership team meeting to get their feedback on a 2-week window during that time frame that we may administer. We would deliver it through the online Panorama Survey platform. All grades 3 through 12 students would participate, and participation in this survey is voluntary. So any students who don't wish to participate, certainly if they don't, they would not have to. They just would not participate. Any questions related to social emotional learning survey?
I have one question, but this actually pertains to all the surveys that you're doing. What accommodations are made for children with, either our EC children, children with learning issues? I was looking at some of the questions and some of the words used within the questions. Do we offer accommodations for a child, say, that normally takes a test in a closed setting or something like that?
And the survey, a little bit different than like an EOG or an EOC, where we wouldn't be able to maybe to answer questions that students might have. As a matter of fact, with our younger students in the elementary grades, we actually have some resources that we provide to the principals and to the teachers, where they can actually kind of go through beforehand and talk about some of the terminology that they might hear, so that they better understand what the questions may ask. And then even in those grade levels, it's okay for the teacher to lead the class through this and go one question at a time with students. So,
How are the results of this survey in particular utilized or communicated?
that's a great question, Mr. Weaver. And what we'll plan to do, and we had shared out some information around social emotional learning survey last year, looking forward to being able to do that again this year, and also bring back to the board the results of our youth risk behavior survey and student climate culture survey from the end of last year, and share that with the board, and that will be done in an upcoming board work session. Look forward to bringing that information to you.
And Mr. Weaver, last year, we had a presentation by students on the student risks that they saw. It was most enlightening to hear the students interpret the questions that had been asked of them on the test, and how they saw the answers as they came through, the percentages of students who felt threatened or who felt harassed at some point, or to hear it from a teenager standpoint, getting the firsthand answer is most interesting. So it's well worth the proceeding with doing these on a yearly basis, so that we have some continuity in the kind of feedback we get.
Exactly, and so, we'll really be able to start to see and track our students by cohort and see, well, number one, we're going to identify what are our real problem areas, and then be able to target, okay, how can we help in some of these areas where maybe we're lacking related to social emotional learning or youth risk behaviors or climate, and then once we put those things in place, we'll be able to have this data annually to see, is what we're doing making a difference, or have some of the things that were a problem in past years, does that continue to be a problem, or do we see it going in a different direction? So I'm excited to see where this goes over the next few years as we continue to have a few years of data to look back on.
And principals have access to their own school, correct? Data as well as the district-wide.
They do. That's another neat thing about the Panorama Education Platform. This is a platform that we can use as a district to administer as many district-wide surveys as we would like. Of course, we want to be careful that we don't overdo it with that, but principals also have the option to give surveys at their own schools, so they may decide on schools that are on surveys that are just relevant for their staff that they want to be able to give, that they can use the platform for as well. So,
Any other questions? Dr. Powers?
Yes, sir.
You want to wrap it up?
okay. Two more.
All right.
Climate culture survey, just a reminder there, and again, I'll get to when we're going to do it in a second, but just, we do want to look at, the climate and culture of our, our schools and our district. This survey was developed. Some of the questions came from the Panorama question banks. Some came from Moore County Schools OCR survey that we gave back in 2013-14. It's 37 questions, and the question categories include demographic information, equity, school climate, and school rigorous expectations. Our plan for delivery, both this survey as well as the YRBS survey that we'll get to in just a second, would plan to administer those in the spring, bringing all of these to you at one time, so we won't have to come back and do this again later in the year. We can hopefully approve all these here at the beginning of the year. We would again give it through the Panorama platform. Only 7th, 9th, and 11th graders would participate in our climate culture survey, and participation in the survey is anonymous and voluntary again. questions related to that before quickly we move on to YRBS? Okay, and again, our YRBS survey, our survey questions come from those developed by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. You know, the CDC administers this survey every 2 years to all districts in the country, but they take a sampling, and we thought it was important here in Moore County that we survey our students annually for the reasons that we talked about earlier. So we've taken those questions from the National YRBS. There's 69 high school questions and 51 middle school questions that, again, we've selected to represent our specific needs here in Moore County schools. And those question categories include behaviors that might cause unintentional injuries, sexual behaviors, and alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. And we would again propose to deliver this in April, May. This survey is given to 8th, 10th, and 12th graders, so this survey would be given during the same 2-week window as the climate culture survey. And basically all 7th through 12th graders would be taking a survey during that window, not both, but just one, whichever one was applicable to which grade they were in. Participation in this survey is anonymous and voluntary, and for this particular survey, because there are some criteria in the survey that has some sensitive information, parents for this survey do have the option to opt their child out by sending a letter to the principal. Again, it's voluntary, but you know, if the parent sends a letter, then they just wouldn't even sit down to take the survey.
Dr. Powers, I can't remember, and I didn't go back and look. With this survey, now with all the emphasis on vaping and the dangers of vaping, is that included in any of this
It
too?
is.
I thought I remembered it, but I wasn't sure.
And it'll be interesting to see, and I'll have some information to share with you in your upcoming monthly board update about some things that we're doing, some steps we're taking to address some of the vaping issues in our schools. So, which came from taking the YRBS, learning that it was such an issue for our students, and now taking steps to try to address that. Yep.
From year to year, about how many students opt out of these things? Do we have many? My recall is that we have very few who opt not to take
Very few.
any of the
Very few.
surveys.
Many schools have none. A few schools may have, you know, some, but less than 1% for sure. Yeah. So.
Also are moving toward longitudinal data. So by administering the surveys to the same cohort of students every other year, then the students that take it in 8th grade, then they take it in 10th grade, and they take it in 12th grade.
That's right.
And 7, 9, and 11 is a separate cohort. So each survey has its own different cohort, and we can, over time, manage that. And so the interventions, such as what Seth will present to us in the near future on vaping, we'll be able to watch that cohort and see if those interventions really had any effect.
So now just some quick information about how we'll share this information with parents and the community. There'll be a link on our Moore County Schools website that will include the survey information, the survey questions, as well as an online portal where parents can provide feedback. We'll send ConnectEd messages that will share with parents where to find that information on our website. There'll also be hard copies available in each school office in case a parent wants to stop by and doesn't have access to look at it online. And then also feedback can be just provided directly to the school principal or to our office as well. The plan would be, if you would endorse this, to seek this feedback from the community, that we would gather that within the next month, and then I would be able to bring that back to you and share that feedback with you at our October work session.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much, Dr. Powers. You have one more item, I believe.
I do. The inevitable out-of-state field trips. So we do have 4 out-of-state field trips for your consideration this month, 3 of which are requests from Westmore K-8 School, Elise Middle School, and West Pine Middle School for class trips to Washington, D.C. At the end of the year. I am glad to see that folks are being proactive in turning these in early to get them approved, which is great. So those 3 trips, again, certainly align with curriculum standards and would be appropriate, and middle school 8th grades have taken those trips in the past. Any questions around the DC trips?
Does Westmore like alternate years with this, since it's their 7th and 8th grade going? Do they go every
This
other
is actually
year?
the first, and this
Oh,
is the first year that they've combined, but they've done it for that reason. Yeah,
Okay.
to be able to do that.
Comments?
And then finally, Pinecrest High School is requesting that qualifying Pinecrest FFA members be allowed to travel to Indianapolis, Indiana for the FFA National Convention. Students will compete on the national level in veterinary science competition, which team members actually qualified for during 2018-19 school year. So seeking approval for them to travel and compete there as well.
Once upon a time, that was the world's largest youth gathering. I don't know if it's annual youth gathering. And if you ever have the opportunity to chaperone it, it's remarkable. You go into this room and every student, there'd be tens of thousands all wearing FFA jackets. Like some sort of strange beehive with blue bees with yellow on their backs, and had an extraordinary time at the FFA convention quite some time ago as a principal.
Well, we have a lot of those trips to consider. It's a good thing. We have a lot of people going to national competitions. It's a good thing. So a lot of ours do a great job, so.
It's wonderful news for our students.
Any questions for Dr. Powers on the out-of-state field trips, overnight field trips? Madam Chair, the staff stands ready to assist the board in your alignment of your action items for next week.
So just as a reminder, we're looking at the items that are under item 4. These will be items to either put on consent or to our action items. Are there any recommendations for which to put as pending action?
Okay.
You mean board action?
I'm sorry, board action.
We knew what you meant.
I'd also like to recommend item B in case there's anything added between now and then.
Good choice.
Mr. Barath, if you could do an updated presentation or list if necessary. The rest are rather, the other 2 items are consent items. Okay, Ms. Potter, do you have all the information? All right, we now come to the portion of board comments, if anyone has any. Are there any board comments to begin with? I'm going to start with Ms. Thompson, just to give Mr. Weaver time. He can choose not to as well. I'm not going to put him on the spot on his first day.
Well, first I would like to just congratulate John and welcome him to our board. I had the opportunity to talk to John, and we're just thankful to have you. And just know that at some point all of us were new coming in, so I know you'll just hit the ground running. So just welcome. And then secondly, I just want to appreciate and just thank Dr. Grimacy and staff for just all the hard work that they have done to get us to the point to where we can take a look at our redistricting plan. Obviously, we've come down a long, long road, and we have talked in years past. That's another can that we keep down the road for years and years and years. So now it's coming to a point of fruition to where we can talk about implementing. So just want to thank you, because your leadership is the one that got all of this together. So thank you for your leadership with regard to that project.
Share that gratitude on behalf of the team.
Can I just say ditto, because that was amazing? That was great.
I'll share your dittos. I'll share your dittos with the team.
Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Let me go ahead and just jump in and say that Ms. Thompson has said it well.
Yes.
Thank you for getting us to this point. To Mike and Laura, who are gone already, but who have walked us through it and held our hands. And welcome to Mr. Weaver.
Yes.
We're glad that you joined us.
Yeah, I have, my comments are on the redistricting and student assignment areas. I've received the superintendent's proposal and will review it. I have read all the emails and letters I have received. I've listened to everything anyone has had to say about the new student assignments. I'll read all the comments that are put online for the plan, and I will listen to all the comments made during our public hearing. And I can guarantee you, after considering all the information, that I will make my decision on what I think is best for my 12,700 kids. Thanks.
I just want to thank all the teachers and students and parents for a good first week. It was, we only had a couple of hiccups that I heard about. I don't know about the rest of you, but they were very, 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 very minor. And I don't think any children got left anywhere they weren't supposed to be, so that's always a good thing the first week. And I want everyone to try and be safe as we go through this. Hopefully, the Hurricane Dorian will skirt us away and we'll only have a little bit of rain, but please be safe.
Well, I'd like to start off by saying that I appreciate the confidence the board has placed in me by appointing me to the vacant position. It's an honor to serve, and I look forward to it and working with all of you. I wasn't here for all the district iterations, the district redistricting, but it's obvious from the presentation today that a tremendous amount of work has gone into it by Dr. Grimacy and his staff and the community, and it was just been touched by so many people. So I feel pretty good that at least we have a good basis to look at and make a decision on. So I appreciate that, and everyone's to be commended for putting the effort in to get us to where we are now.
Thank you. I have nothing further to add. I think it's all been so eloquently said by our board members today, and ditto, I suppose.
Madam Chair.
I always look to you,
Move
Mr.
the meeting
Dennison.
be adjourned.
Is there, moved by Mr. Dennison, seconded by Ms. Caldwell. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried 7-0. Thank you very much.